couple months ago, I began my classes at Chico State University. As I was preparing for my freshman year, I was able to find everything that I needed except for a laptop. I'm not exactly very good at letting a dollar go for something, especially when I could need it for something for less. I scoured the internet for good deals on laptops, finding none that suit my fragile habits. Classes were only 2 weeks away, and I was becoming desperate for a computer. Several days later, I saw an ad in the newspaper for a laptop that was being sold for $600, and not too far from where I live. It was a very nice Dell laptop too, seeming odd, and it was being sold for almost $1,000 less than the store price. I drove to the seller's address the following day. The house was farther out in the city, butting up to a dense forest. Outside the house was an old Chevrolet and a mass of old signs and other various vintage-looking items. I rang the doorbell, and a thin man in a flannel jacket came to the door. When I asked about the laptop, he looked almost relieved and told me that he was ready to sell it immediately. Luckily, I came with cash in hand, and after the proof of the good condition, I went home with a new computer. Excited to have my first self-bought laptop, I powered it up and began uploading my own programs and applications on it. Upon searching the hard drive, I found a folder hidden away on it, which was odd because the man selling it told me that the memory was wiped out clean and ready for a fresh start. The folder was titled 9/17/10, presumably a date. I opened the folder, revealing 6 videos and 3 pictures. Curiosity got the best of me. I decided to watch the videos. The first video was simply titled 001. The video was shot from a shaky camcorder inside of a vehicle, recording a woman walking out of the bar and getting into the car at night. After a couple of seconds, the woman drove off, and almost immediately the person recording the video began to drive after her. The video ended after 24 seconds. It almost seemed like the cameraman had been waiting for the woman for a long time. Come to think of it, I wasn't too alarmed by the time, just a little unsettled. I opened the next video, filed 002. I assumed that this was the next part of the first video. My presumption was right. As it began with the camera on top of the console, facing out of the windshield, it was raining now, leading me to believe that this was short while after the first video ended. I could barely make out the vehicle of the 2 cars ahead of this one, the same car that the woman was in, that the bar she left in. This went on for an unsettling 47 seconds before the camera cuts out. I began to get a little nervous, fearing that this might take a turn for worse. But as I was watching the television show, I wanted to see how this was headed. Not totally concerned yet, I decided to press on. The third video was, of course, titled 003. This was the one that got me officially concerned. The clip began from the same shaking hands for the first clip. It was now pouring rain outside of the car, and I could barely make out the figure in a fur coat with an umbrella walking out to the front door of a house. I could only assume that this person was, and whose house this belonged to. The figure had entered the house and closed the door. The following stillness greatly unnerved me. The only thing that could be heard was the sound of rain dumping on the car. After roughly 2 minutes of this nerve-wracking nothingness, the lights inside the house cut out. Another minute or so went by before the camera was placed onto the console again, and the sound of a person exiting the car broke the stillness. After the car door quietly closed, another figure, this time hooded, could be seen walking towards the house. I began to feel a knot tightening inside of my stomach. As the stranger walked around to the back of the house, whoever this person was, they definitely weren't supposed to be there. After a couple of seconds, the lights to the house cut out. It was pitch black, and only the rain alerted me that the camera was still rolling. The video ended about 9 seconds of rain and darkness. I was now pretty sure that this was not an innocent little project of anything of that nature, and I began to feel stupid for checking this laptop seller credibility. Was this person stalking the woman, the same person whom I met earlier? Although the whole experience, I had a doormat through the back of the head to call the police, but I wasn't ready just yet. Reluctantly, now I began the fourth video, 004. It was dark again, but the rain had stopped, and I was left with only silence. Not long after the clip began, I began to make sound of footsteps on gravel, getting louder as someone was approaching the vehicle. The car door opened and a dome light was turned on, and I could tell the camera was on the floor of the car, pointing up towards the roof. I heard some fumbling in the background. Suddenly a thump sound heard from the back of the truck. An arm abruptly obstructed the camera's view, and a large strap could be seen being pulled out from the car. I had only one scenario running through my head, and I hoped it wasn't true. The person picked up the camera and put it back into the console and began to back up. They drove for a good 3 minutes before parking in a branch off the road and exiting the car to work on the load that they were carrying. 6 minutes after, the car was moving again to a different location, and the camera was picked up and carried unhanded away from the car. I could see now that it was the same shitbook truck that was in front of the seller's house. I was ready to call the cops on this creep when the camera turned towards the house. It was a completely different house than the one I visited. I was a little relieved by this, though it didn't prove anything. As the fourth video came to an end, I was wondering whether or not I was prepared to see what came next. I could only hope that this was a prank, or at least had a very happy ending. 005 began inside the house. It was extremely dark, and the only thing that I could see was the figure that would only occasionally walk in front of the camera. It was also quiet for the first few minutes, minus the occasional barking of dogs outside. Eventually, a small sound started to appear. The small sound soon escalated to a loud, muffled scream. Shaking and struggling sounds became more apparent as time went on, as well as crying. A light abruptly came on, and the camera was lifted and panned to the center of the room, revealing a beaten and bloody woman tied to a chair. From what I could make out, this was, in fact, the woman from the bar. The camera zoomed in on her face in what seemed like an eternity before stopping. I couldn't believe this was happening. The original hope was that the movie or something like that had long since dismissed. With only one video remained, I was beginning to fear for my own safety. I locked my door and closed my blinds and pushed onward. I began 006 with a small hope that this woman was still alive and that I could save her. The final installment of this horror show began in a bathroom setting. The camera was placed on the counter facing the mirror in which I could see a door. The only sound I could make was a familiar sound that destroyed my hopes. Power tools. I sat in front of the screen for what felt like hours before the sound stopped. More silence, then heavy footsteps, accompanied by what sounded like something being dragged. The doorknob turned and the door was pushed open. Out of the darkness of the rest of the house appeared a middle-aged woman dressed in what I could only describe as a lab attire, sporting as a respiratory and a pair of long rubber gloves. This, for some strange reason, gave me a small amount of relief. In the reflection, the woman struggled to drag something to the bathtub. As she hoisted it into the tub, I could see it was a large garbage bag. I felt like I was dreaming. It was like I was watching a horror movie unfolding on the screen. She lifted up the bag up from the tub, now empty except for whatever entrails that dropped out. She picked up the camera and placed it on the ground facing the tub. On the floor in front of the bathtub was an assortment of coarses, substance, and several other empty containers. The woman began to dump the liquid into the tub, which was followed by an awful, awful sound that I can only describe as pop rocks mixed with coke. The video ended as I was left befuddled and panicked. I finally opened the pictures as the first picture of the truck. The second was of a girl tied up before she was beaten. The third picture was of a corrupted file noticed, but maybe it was a good thing. I managed to keep two of the pictures before I handed the laptop over to the police. I was reimbursed my $600 along with the bonus. Apparently, the victim was the young girlfriend of the older woman's ex-husband. The older woman was arrested almost a year before, but was freed of all charges due to lack of evidence, and the ex-husband was incarcerated instead. I guess this was the missing link. I hope this would solve the mystery of the unanswered questions, although I'm not sure for who the man in the flannel jacket was, or how he got a hold of the laptop, or how he owns the same truck as the murderer. I guess I'll just have to leave that. In 1970, a mother purchased an antique doll an antique Raggedy Ann doll from a hobby store. The doll was a present for her daughter Donna on her birthday. Donna at the time was a college student preparing to be a graduate at her nursing degree, residing in a tiny apartment with her roommate Angie, a nurse as well. Pleased with the doll, Donna placed it on her bed as a decoration and didn't give it a second thought until a few days later. Within that time, both Donna and Angie noticed that there appeared to be something very strange and creepy about the doll. The doll apparently moved on its own, relatively unnoticed moments at first, like a strange position, but with the passage of time, the movements became more noticeable. Donna and Angie would come back home to find the doll in a completely different room, which they had left it in. Sometimes the doll would times be found upright, standing on its feet, leaning against a chair in the dining room. Several times Donna placed the doll on the couch before leaving for work, would return home to find the doll would be in her room on her bed with the door closed. One night, Donna came home to find the doll had moved again. This time, it was on her bed. Donna had come to find that it was typical for the doll. Somewhat she knew that it was different. Something wasn't right. A sense of fear came over her when she inspected the doll and saw it had a bloody drop on the back of its hands and its chest. Seemingly from nowhere, a red liquid had appeared on the doll. Scared and desperate, Donna and Angie decided it was time to seek expert advice. Not knowing where to run, a medium and a seance was held. Donna was then introduced by the spirit of Annabelle Higgins. The medium related to the story of Annabelle to both Donna and Angie. Annabelle was a girl that resided on the property before the apartment was built. She was a young girl only 7 years old when her lifeless body was found in a field upon which the apartment complex now stands. The spirit related to the medium that she felt comfort with Donna and Angie and wanted to stay with them by moving into the doll. Feeling compassion for Annabelle and her story, Donna gave her permission to inhabit the doll and stay. They were to soon find out, however, that Annabelle was not what she seemed to be. Later that week, Donna saw that the doll, or Annabelle, was ripped in jagged cuts along her mouth. One night, Donna awoke to something singing like a little girl. She walked into her bathroom to see Angie dead with the words, "Wanna play?" written in blood on her friend. The doll was never found. Lou was friends with Donna and Angie and had been with them since the day the doll had arrived. He had never been fond of the doll on several occasions, warned Donna that it was evil. Seeing that she should have got rid of it, however, Donna had developed a personal tie to the doll and decided to keep it, despite Lou's feelings. Her decision was a terrible mistake. One night, Lou awoke with a jolt of terror, a jolt that didn't seem it was from usual nightmare. Somehow, something felt different. What would appear to be a common case of sleep paralysis became all too real. He looked around the room, but didn't conceive anything out of the ordinary. At first, anyway. Looked towards Donna's feet, he saw the doll Annabelle. It began to slowly glide against his leg, moving over his chest and stopped at his neck. Helpless against it, the doll began to strangle him. After a moment, Lou, at the point of anxiety, blacked out. He woke the next morning, certain it was an ordinary night terror, and was determined to get rid of the doll himself and the spirit that possessed it. Preparing for a road trip the next day, Lou and Annie were reading over the map along in the apartment. The apartment was eerie quiet. The silence was broken when ruffling sounds coming from Donna's room aroused fear that someone had broken into the apartment. Lou, determined to figure out what was causing the noise, quietly made his way into the bedroom. He waited for the noise to stop before entering and turning on the light. The room was completely empty except for Annabelle, who was tossed in a corner of the floor. Lou searched the room size for forced entry, but nothing was out of place. As he got close to the door, he got the distant impression that somebody was behind him. Spinning around, Lou found that despite of uneasy, nobody besides himself, the doll, were in the room. Then in a fear motion, he found himself doubled over in pain, with blood spurting the cut of his chest. Upon opening his shirt, there over his chest where appeared to be 7 distinct claw marks. Today, I hope you enjoyed this article, and should you ever visit the infamous Annabelle, she can be found at the Warner Occult Museum In Montrose, Connecticut, the museum is run over Lorraine Warren, the famous paranormal investigator and now frequent guest of the television show I can read today. And now frequent guest on the television show Paranormal State housed in a glass case at the museum. You will find Annabelle, Miss Warner, related that Annabelle still moves about occasionally and is still known to making growling noises at unsuspecting visitors. Two dorm mates in college were in the same science class. The teacher had just reminded them about the midterm the next day when one dorm mate, let's call her Julie, got asked to the big bash by the hottest guy in school. The other dorm mate, Meg, had pretty much no interest in going and being a diligent student. She took notes on what the midterm was about. After the entire period of flirting with her date, Julie was totally unprepared for her test, while Meg was completely prepared for a major study day with her books. At the end of the day, Julie spent hours getting ready for the party while Meg started studying. Julie tried to get Meg to go, but she was insisted that she would study and pass the test. The girls were rather close, and Julie didn't like leaving Meg alone to be bored while she was out having a blast. Julie finally gave up, using the excuse that she would cram in the next morning. Julie went to the party and had a time of her life with her date. She headed back to the dorm around 2 in the morning and decided not to wake up Meg. She went to bed nervous about the midterm and decided that she would wake up early to ask Meg for help. She woke up and went to wake up Meg. Meg was lying on her stomach, apparently sound asleep. Julie rolled Meg over to reveal Meg's terrified face. Julie, concerned, turned on the desk lamp. Meg's study stuff was still open and had blood all over it. Meg had been slaughtered. Julie, in terror, fell to the floor and looked up to see what was written on Meg's wall. In Meg's blood wrote, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?"
I see you've inserted the cartridge again. It's good that your curiosity has brought you back to me. Since you ran away last time, I never had the chance to introduce myself to you. You. I'm Ben, and you let me drown. How could you do this to me? How could you do this? Come on, let's play a game. I can't wait to see how you die. I'm sure it will be fun for one of us.
Post 1, September 7th, 2010. Okay, I need your help with this. This is not Creepypasta. This is a long read, but I feel like my safety or well-being could very well depend on this. This is a video game related, specifically Majora's Mask, and this is the creepiest shit that has ever happened to me in my entire life. Having said that, I recently moved into my dorms starting sophomore in college, and a friend of mine gave me an old Nintendo 64 to play. I was stoked, to say the least. I could finally play these old games from my youth that I haven't touched in at least a decade. His Nintendo 64 came with a yellow controller and rather a shoddy copy of Super Smash Bros. And while beggars can't be choosers, needless to say, it didn't take long until I became bored of beating up level 9 CPUs. That week, I decided to drive around my neighborhood about 20 minutes or so off campus, hitting up local garage sales, hoping to score some good game deals and from ignorant parents. I ended up picking up a copy of Pokemon Stadium, GoldenEye, fuck yeah, F-Zero, and 2 other controllers for $2. Satisfied, I began to drive out of the neighborhood when one last house caught my attention. I still had no idea why it did. There were no cars. There were only one table and a set of random junk on it. But something sort of drew me there. I usually trust my gut on these things, so I got out of my car and I was greeted by an old man. His outward appearance was, for lack of better words, displeasing. It was odd. If you asked me to tell you why I thought he was displeasing, I couldn't really pinpoint anything. There was just something about him that put me on edge. I couldn't explain it. All I can tell you is that if it wasn't for the middle of the afternoon and there were other people around within shouting distance, I wouldn't have thought of approaching this man. He flashed a crooked smile at me and asked what I was looking for, and immediately I noticed that he was blind in one of his eyes. His right eye had that glazed over look in it. I forced myself to look in his left eye instead, trying not to offend him, and asked him if he had any old video games. I was already wondering how I could politely excuse myself from the situation when he would tell me he had no idea what a video game was. But to my surprise, he said he had a few ones in an old box. He assured me he'd be back in a jiffy and turned his head back into the garage. As I watched him hobble away, I couldn't help but notice what he was selling on the table. Littered across the table was rather particular paintings, various artworks that looked like ink blots that a psychiatrist might show you. Curious, I looked through them. It was obvious why no one visited this guy's garage sale. They weren't exactly artistically pleasing. As I came to the last one, for some reason, it looked almost like Majora's Mask, the same heart-shaped body with its spikes pounding outward. Instantly, I just thought that since I was secretly hoping to find a game at this garage sale, some feud and bullshit was projecting itself in the ink blobs. But given the event that happened afterwards, I'm not so sure now. I should have asked the old man about it. I wish I would have asked the old man about it. After staring at the Majora-shaped blot, I looked up and the old man was suddenly there again, arm's length in front of me, smiling. I admit, I jumped out of reflex and laughed nervously as he handed me a Nintendo 64 cartridge. It was a standard gray color, except that some had written Majora on the black permanent marker. I got butterflies in my stomach as I realized what coincidence that this was and asked how much he wanted for it. The old man smiled at me and told me that I could have it for free, that it was used to belong to a kid who was about my age that didn't live here anymore. There was something weird about it, how the man phrased it though, but I didn't really pay attention to it then. I was too caught up in only finding this game, but getting it for free. I reminded myself to be a bit skeptical since this looked like a pretty shady cartridge and there was no guarantee that it would work. But the optimism inside me interjected that might have been some kind of beta version or pirated version of the game, and that was all needed to go back to Cloud 9. I thanked the man, and the man smiled at me and wished me while saying goodbye then. At least, that's what I thought he said. All the way to the car ride home, I had the nagging doubt that the man had said something else. My fear was conjoined when I booted up the game. To my surprise, it worked just fine. There was one save file, simply, Ben. Goodbye, Ben. He was saying, goodbye, Ben. I felt bad for the man. Obviously a grandparent and obviously going senile, and I, for some reason or another, reminded him of his grandson, Ben. Out of curiosity, I looked at one of the same files. Eyeballing it, I could tell that he was pretty far in the game. He had almost beaten the game, masked 3 out of 4, and remains of the bosses. I noticed that he still used an owl statue to save his game. He was on day 3 by the Stone Tower Temple, with hardly an hour left before the moon would crash. I remember thinking that it was a shame that he had came so close to beating the game but never finished it. I made a new save file named Link, added an addition, and started the game up, ready to relive my childhood. For such a shady cartridge, I was impressed at how smoothly it ran. Literally, it was a retail copy of the game, save for minor hiccups here and there, like text being where they shouldn't be, random flashes of cutscene, and odd intervals, but nothing so bad. However, the only thing that little unnerving that at times was the NPCs would call me Link, and at the times others would call me Ben. I figured it was just a bug, a fluke at the program causing our files to get mixed up or something. It did kind of creep me out though after a while. It was after I had beaten the Woodfall Temple that I regrettably went to the save file and deleted Ben. I had intended to preserve the file just out of respect of the gamer's original owner. It's not like I needed 2 save files anyway. Hoping that it would solve the problem, it did. And it didn't now. NPCs wouldn't call me anything. What the name should be, the dialogue would just be a blank space. The NAV file would still be linked though. Frustrated with homework to do, I laid the game down. I started playing the game again last night, getting the lens of truth and working my way towards completing the Snowhead Temple. Now, some of you hardcore Majora's Mask players know about the 4th day glitch. For those of you who don't, you can Google it. But the gist of it is, right when the clock is about to hit 000000 on the final day, you talk to the astronomer and look through the telescope. If you time it right, the countdown disappears, and you essentially have another day to finish whatever you were doing. Deciding to do the glitch and try to finish the Snowhead Temple, I happened to get it right on the first try, and the time counter at the bottom disappeared. However, when I pressed the B to exit the telescope, instead of being greeted by the astronomer, I found myself in the Majora's Mask fight room at the end of the game, the trippy boxed-in area, staring at the Skull Kid hovering above me. There was no sound, just him floating in the air above me, and in the background music, which was regular for the area, but still creepy. Immediately, my palms began to sweat. This was definitely not normal. Skull Kid never appeared here. I tried moving around the area, and no matter where I went, Skull Kid would always be facing me, looking at me, not saying anything. Nothing would happen, though, and this kept up for around 60 seconds. I thought the game had bugged or something, but I was beginning to doubt that very much. I was about to reach the reset button when a text appeared on the screen. You're not sure why, but you apparently had a reservation. I instantly recognized that text. You get that message when you get the room key at the stockpot inn, but why was it playing here? I refused to entertain the notion that it was almost as if the game was trying to communicate with me. I started to navigate the room again, testing to see if it was some sort of trigger that enabled me to interact with something here. Then I realized how stupid it was to even think that someone could reprogram the game. That would be absurd. Sure enough, 15 seconds later, another message appeared on the screen that said, like the first one, it was already pre-existing frames. Go to the lair of the boss's temple? Yes or no? I paused for a second, contemplating which I should press, and how the game would react. When I realized that I couldn't select no, taking a deep breath, I pressed yes, and the screen faded to white, with the words Dawn of a New Day, with the subtitle 11111111 beneath it, where I could potentially feel with the most intense sense of dread and impotent fear that I have ever experienced. The only way I describe the way I felt is having this feeling of inexplicable depression on the profound scale. I was normally not a depressed person, but the way I felt here was a feeling that I didn't even know existed. It was such a twisted, powerful presence that seemed to wash over me. I appeared in some kind of weird Twilight Zone fusion of clock tower. I walked out of the clock tower as you normally do when you start from day one, only to find that all of the inhibitions were gone. Usually with the 4th day glitch, you could still find the guards and the dog that still run around the tower. This time, they were all gone. What replaced there was an anonymous feeling that was something out of there. In the same area was me that was watching me. I had 4 hearts in a hero's bow, but at the point I was very convinced from my avatar. I felt that I personally was in some kind of danger. Perhaps the most chilling thing was the music. It was the song of healing, ripped straight out of the game itself, but played in reverse. The music was getting louder, building up so I should expect something to pop out at you, but nothing ever did, and the constant loop began to wear onto my mental state. Every now and then I would hear the faithful laugh of the Happy Mask salesman in the background, just enough so that I wasn't sure if I was hearing things, but just loud enough to keep me determined to find him. I looked in all 4 zones of the clock tower only to find nothing. No one. Textures were missing. West Clock Tower had me walking on air. The entire area felt broken, hopelessly broken. As a song of healing repeated for what seemed like the 50th time, I remember standing in the middle of South Clock Tower, realizing that I never felt so alone in a video game before. As I walked through the ghost town, I didn't know whether it was a combination of the out-of-place text and the atmosphere and the haunted melody of the once peaceful and soothing song being butchered and disoriented, but I was literally on the verge of tears, and I had no idea why. I hardly ever cry. Something had gripped me here in this powerful sense of depression that was both foreign and crippling. I tried to leave Clock Tower, but every time I attempted to zone out, the screen would fade to black, and I was just in another part of the Clock Tower. I tried playing my ocarina. I wanted to escape, and I did not want to be here. But every time I played the Song of Time or the Song of Soaring, it would only say, "Your notes echo far," but nothing happens. By this point, it was obvious the game didn't want me to leave, but I had no idea why. It was keeping me here, and I didn't want to go inside the building. I felt that I was too vulnerable to whatever I was terrified of. I don't know why, but I came up with the idea that maybe if I drowned myself at the laundry pool, I could spawn somewhere else and leave this place. As I zoned in and ran towards the pool, that's when it happened. Link grabbed his head, and the screen flashed for a brief moment of the happy mask salesman smiling at me. Not Link. Me with Skull Kid's scream playing in the background, and when the screen turned, I was staring at the Link statue from playing the song of Elegy of Emptiness. I screamed as the thing just stared back at me with a haunting facial expression. I turned and ran out and back into South Clock Tower. And to my plain horror, the fucking statue followed me in the way. The only way I can compare this is like a weeping angel from Doctor Who. Every so often, at random intervals, the animation would play of the statue appearing behind me. It was like the thing was chasing me, or I don't want to even fucking say it, haunting me. By this point, I was on the verge of hysteria, but not even once did I thought of turning off the console occurred to me. I don't know why. I was so wrapped up in it. The terror felt so real. I tried to shake the statue, but it was literally appearing right behind me every single time. Link started to begin to make weird animations I had never seen before. He would flail his arms around or spaz randomly, and the screen would cut to Happy Mask salesman smiling again. For a brief moment before I was face to face with the fucking statue again, I ended up running into the Swordsmaster's dojo and ran to the back. I don't know why, but in my panic, I just wanted some kind of assurance that I was not the only one here. To my dismay, I found no one. But as I turned to leave, the statue cornered me in the cubby in the back. I tried attacking the statue with my sword, but to no avail. Confused, backed into a corner. I tried staring at the statue, waiting for it to kill me. Suddenly, the screen flashed again to the happy masked salesman, and Link turned to face my screen, standing upright, mirroring the statue, looking at me along with his copy, literally staring at me. Whatever was left on the fourth wall was completely shattering while I ran out of the dojo terrified. Suddenly, the game brought me into an underground tunnel, and the reverse song of healing queued up again, and I was only given a brief moment to rest before the statue started appearing behind me again, this time aggressively. I could only take a few moments before it could summon behind me. I hurriedly made my way out of the tunnel and appeared suddenly in Clock Tower. As I ran aimlessly in sheer panic, suddenly a dead screaming, and the screen faded to black as Dawn of a New Day and 1111111 appeared again. The screen faded, and I was cut to the top of the Clock Tower with Skull Kid hovering over me again, silently. I looked up, and the moon was back, looming just meters above my head. But the Skull Kid was just staring at me hauntingly with its fucking mask. A new song was playing. The Stone Tower Temple theme played in reverse. In some sort of desperate attempt, I quit my bow and fired a shot at the Skull Kid, and it actually hit him, and he played an animation of him reflailing back. I fired again. And on the third arrow, the text appeared again, saying, "You won't do that. That won't do you any good." Hee hee. And I was picked off the ground and levitated towards the back, and then Link's screen as bursted into the flames, instantly killing him. I jumped when this happened. I had never seen this move used by anyone in the game, and Skull Kid himself didn't have any of these moves. As the death screen played, my lifeless body still burning, the Skull Kid laughed, and the screen faded to black, only for me to reappear in the same place. I decided to charge him, but the same thing happened. Link's body was lifted off the ground by some unknown force, and he immediately burst into flames, killing him. This time, During the death scene, the faint sound of the reverse song of healing could be heard. On my third and final try, I noticed that no music was playing, that it was just eerie silence. I remembered that in the original encounter with the Skull Kid, you were supposed to use the ocarina to travel back in time or summon the giants. I attempted to play the Song of Time, but before I could hit the last note, Link's body once again horrifically exploded into flames and he died. As the death screen neared its end, it began to chug, as if the cartridge was trying to process a lot of something. When the screen came to, it was the same screen as the first 3 times, except this time Link was lying on the ground dead in a position I had never seen in the game before. His head was tilted towards the camera, with the Skull Kid floated above him. I couldn't move. I couldn't press any buttons. All I could do was stare at Link's dead body. After around 30 seconds of this, the game simply fades out a message, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" before kicking out to the screen title. Upon getting back to the title screen and starting, I noticed the same files were no longer there. Instead, Link was replaced by "Your turn." Your turn had 3 hearts, 0 mask, and no items. I selected Your turn, and immediately when I did, I returned to the clock tower's rooftop scene of Link's dead and the Skull Kid hovering over, with the Skull Kids laughing, looping again and again. I quickly hit the reset button. When the game booted up again, there was one more save file under it below Your Turn entitled Ben. Ben's save file is right back where it was before I deleted it at Stone Tower Temple with the moon almost crashing. I turned the game off at this point. It's not superstitious, but this is way too fucked up, even for me. I haven't played it all today. Hell, I didn't even get any sleep last night. I kept hearing the reverse song of healing music in my head and just remembered the scene of dread I felt exploring Clock Tower. I drove back to the old man's house today to ask him some questions with a buddy of mine. No way was I going there alone, only to find that the house was for sale in front of the yard. And when I rang the doorbell, no one was home. So now I'm back here writing the rest of my thoughts and recording what happened. Sorry that this has grammatical errors and whatnot. I'm running on no sleep here. I'm terrified of this game. Even so, now that I'm relieved and it's the second time writing this all down, but I feel like there's still more than meets the eye, and that there's something calling me to investigate this further. I think Ben is something in this equation, but I don't know what, and if I can get a hold of the old man, then I would be able to find some answers. I need another day or so to recuperate before tackling this game again. It's already taken a toll on my sanity, I feel like, but next time I do this, I'm going to be recording my footage all the way through. The audio to record only came to me towards the end, so you see the last few minutes of what I saw, including Skull Kid and the eagle statue, but it's on YouTube here. Day 4.WNV. I'm going to stay in this thread of a little while longer before I fall asleep to answer any questions you guys might have, or hopefully listen to the ideas or theories to help me shed some light onto this, or maybe things I should try to do. I think I'm going to play Ben's file tomorrow to see what happens. Maybe I was supposed to do this all along. I don't believe in paranormal shit. This is a little fucked up, but maybe this Ben guy is really good hacker/program. I don't want to think about the alternatives if he isn't. The end of this copy-paste, I'm hoping that maybe this is some kind of running gag the developers had, and that other people have gotten the gag or hacked copies of the game like this. This really scares me. Post number 2, September 8th, 2010. I'm going to post whatever happened in the link of the video footage, but last night everything got too real for me. I think I'm done messing around with this. I passed out pretty much immediately after making that thread, but last night the Elegy of Emptiness statue I had dreamed about, I dreamed that it was following me in my dream, that I would be minding my own business when I feel my neck hair stand up on the end. I would turn around and see that thing, that horrible lifeless statue, would be staring up with those empty eyes right at me, mercilessly inches away. In my dream, I remember calling Ben, and never before had I had a dream that I could never remember so vividly. But the important thing is I did get some sleep. I suppose today, putting off playing the game as long as I could, I drove back to the neighbors to see if the old man came back. As I expected, the car was still gone and no one was home. As I was walking back to the car, the man next door mowing the grass killed the power to his lawnmower and asked me if I was looking for someone. I told him that I was looking to talk to an old man that lived there, to which he told me I already knew he was moving. Trying a different avenue, I asked if the old man had any family or relatives I could talk to. I discovered that this old man never been married, nor did he have any children or grandchildren through adoption. Starting to become worried, I asked the final question, one that I should have asked from the beginning. Who was Ben? The man's expression turned grim, and I learned that 4 doors down, around 8 years ago, on April 23rd, the man informed me that the same day of his anniversary, that's how he knew the specific date, there was an accident with a young boy named Ben in the neighborhood. Shortly after his parents moved, and despite any further attempts to talk to the man to get more information, he wouldn't budge anything else. I went back and started playing again. I loaded up the game and immediately I jumped at the title screen where the mask flies by. The sound that played was not normal whoosh sound. It was something much more higher pitched. I pressed start, bracing the worst, but just like the 2 nights ago, the save files, Your Turn and Ben, were displayed. Truth be told, I looked at the Ben file earlier. It soon fluctuated between displaying an owl statue and not. I brought up the file, hesitated for a moment, noticing the stats were not the same as the original were 2 days ago. It seemed like they had already completed Stone Tower this time. Summoning my courage, I selected it. I immediately thrust into complete chaos. Sure enough, I was outside Stone Tower Temple, but that's about all that I was expected. The zone itself wasn't called Stone Tower Temple, but rather Stone, and immediately a dialogue box was completely gibberish that I couldn't make out greeted me. Link's body was disoriented. His back was crooked violently, and the side where his posture was immediately disfigured. Link's expression was dull and almost murderous. He had an expression on his face that I didn't recognize before. It was a blank look, as if he were dead. As Link stood there, his body immediately regularly, it spasmed back and forth. I examined what had been on my avatar and noticed that the C button items I had never seen before. Some kind of note, but pressing it did nothing. Sounds played back and forth that I didn't recognize from the game, almost demonic in nature. And there was some kind of high-pitched yip or some kind of laugh or something playing in the background. I had all 2 minutes to take the environment before another one of those fucking Elegy of Emptiness statue was summoned, and immediately after I was cut into a Dawn of a New Day screen, except this time it was without the 11 subtext. It was a Doku scrub in Clock Tower. The scene was normally played after the first time you traveled back in time. Tata would say, "What just happened?" It's as if everything has, but instead of saying, "Start over," she finished her remark in a broken text and laughed. And as the laugh of the happy mask salesman played in the background, I was put back in the control of my character, but from a fucked up angle. I was looking from behind the door of the clock tower, watching my avatar run along as a Goku scrub, seeing as how I really had no place to go because I couldn't see anything. I went inside the door. There I was greeted by a happy mask salesman who told me, "You've met with the terrible fates, haven't you?" before the screen wiped out. I was in the Tremaran fields as a human again. I might as well not have been playing the same game anymore. I was being wrapped around, and there was no sign of the day clock or anything. I took a moment to get my bearings. As I looked around the field, and immediately I could tell that this was not normal. There was no enemies, and a twisted version of the Happy Mask Salesman thing was playing. I decided to run towards Woodfall before I noticed a gathering of 3 figures off the side, one of them being Epona. As I approached them, to my horror, I saw the Happy Mask Salesman, the Skull Kid, and the Elegy of Emptiness statues just standing there. I figured maybe they were bugged out, but by now I told myself that it should not I should have known better. Nonetheless, I approached them carefully and found that Skull Kid was playing some kind of idle animation on loop. Same with Epona, and the elegy of Eponus statue was doing what it's been doing all along, just standing there eerily. It was the Happy Mask salesman that scared me more profoundly than the other two. He was too idle, wearing his shit-eating green, but wherever I moved, his head slowly turned and followed me. I had not engaged in any dialogue with him, nor was I in combat with him, yet his head still cornered to follow my movements. Reminded of the first encounter with Skull Kid on the top of Clock Tower, I pulled out my ocarina, to which the game played the ding sound where you're supposed to play your ocarina. I tried a song I haven't yet played, the Happy Mask theme song, and the song had been playing on loop back in day 4, the Song of Healing. I finished playing the song. As I did, an eerie pitched shriek blasted from my TV. The sky immediately started flashing. Happy Mask Salesman twisted theme song sped up, intensifying the fear inside me. Link exploded into flames and died. The three figures stayed lit up during my death. The screen as they watched my lifeless body burn. I can't describe to you how sudden and terrifying the transition from the eerie to terror it is. You're going to have to watch the video if you want to see it firsthand. The same fear that caused me to lose sleep 2 days ago started to grip me again as I was met with the text, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you, for the 3rd time." There has been some kind of meaning behind all that. I had little more time to ponder as I immediately given another small cutscene of transforming into Zora, and now I found myself in the Great Temple Bay, hesitant but curious to see what the game had in store for me. I slowly made my way towards the beach, where I found Epona, and I wondered why the game had decided to put her here. Was the game implying she was trying to get a drink? Unable to take the mask off, I decided that right in the scene wasn't a reason she was placed there. Suddenly, I realized that Epona kept neighing, and the way she kept angling again, it looked like she was trying to signal a point me off into the distance. It was a hunch, but I dove into the Great Bay and started swimming. Sure enough, I almost missed it. I found something at the bottom of the ocean, the one last elegy of Eponus statue. I went down to examine it, and suddenly my Zora started doing a choking animation I had never seen a Zora do before, which didn't even make sense because Zoras can breathe underwater. Regardless, my character choked to death and died, and again the statue was the only thing that highlighted my death. I didn't respawn this time. I was booted back to the main menu status as I restarted the console. Ben.wmv. The press start screen was before me. I knew the only reason why it would put me here is because the save files have changed again. Taking a deep breath, I pressed start, and I was right. The new save files told me about Ben. Now it made sense why the statue appeared when I tried to go to the laundry pool. The game must have anticipated how I would have tried to escape the day 4 clock town. The 2 save files told me his fate. As I suspected, Ben was dead. He had drowned. The game was obviously wasn't through with me. It taunts me with the new save files. It wants me to keep playing. It wants me to go further, but I'm done with this shit. I'm not touching any more save files. This is already way too horrifying for me. I don't even believe in paranormal, but I'm running out of explanations. Why would someone send me this message? I don't understand it. I just get too depressed thinking about this. The footage is up here for those of you who want to try and analyze it. Maybe there's some kind of coded message in the gibberish for something, or something symbolic in this, and what I went through. I'm too emotionally and mentally drained to fuck with it anymore. Post 3, September 10th, 2010. I know it's early in the morning. I stayed up all night. I can't sleep. I don't care if people see this. That's not the point. I want the word to get spread. I want the word to get spread so I don't suffer for nothing. I've lost the will to type about this. The less I dwell on this, the better. I think the video just speaks for itself. I did what you guys told me to do. I played the elegy of emptiness song at the first attempt by the game I was given. But I think that's what the game, or Ben, Jesus Christ, I can't believe I'm even humoring the absurd idea he exists in the game wanted me to do. He's following me now, not in just the game. He's in my dreams. I see him all the time, behind my back, just watching me. I haven't gone to any of my classes. I stayed in my dorm room and with the windows closed and the blinds shut. That way, I know he didn't watch me. But he still gets me when I play. When I play, he can still see me. The game is scaring me now. It talked to me just for the first time. Not just using the text already in the game. It spoke to me. Talked to me. Its reference Ben. It talked to me. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it wants. I never wanted this. I just want my old life back. Drown.WMB. Stuff like this doesn't happen to people like me. I'm just a kid. I'm not even old enough to drink yet. It's not fair. I want to go home. I want to see my parents again. I'm so far away from my home here at school. I want to hug my mom again. I want to forget the statue's horrible blank face. My original game file is back, just the way I left it before it was gone. I don't want to play anymore. I feel like something bad is about to happen if I don't, but that's impossible. It's a video game. Haunted or not, it can't hurt me, right? Like, seriously, though, it can't, right? What would I keep telling myself? But every time I think about it, I'm not sure. September 4th, or post for September 12th, 2010. Let me clear things up. I know you guys are worried about Gisable. It's okay. He's finished moving out today, and he said he's going back home. He's just taking this semester off. I'm not really sure what happened. I have a vague idea, but you guys probably know more than I do. I'm Gisable's roommate, and obviously I know something was wrong with him for a few days now. He stayed in his room all the time, fell out of contact with literally all of his friends. I'm pretty sure he hasn't been eating hardly anything after the second day. I couldn't stay in there anymore, so I've been crashing at a buddy's place, only coming in the room to get my stuff that I needed. I tried talking to him several times, but he would cut me off or keep the conversation brief when I asked him about his strange behavior. It's like he was convinced something was hunting him. Yesterday, I came to grab my philosophy book, and he approached me looking awful, like horrible bags under his eyes. He handed me a flash drive and gave me specific instructions. He told me that he needs me to do one last favor for him. He finally explained to me what has been going on. Gave me the account for his YouTube account and told me that he's getting away from here. That it lured him to play again, instead of trying to change things, and that he shouldn't have done that. And to upload the footage to inform people what happened. I told him that he could do it himself, and that he got this weird look in his eyes, and told me that he never looking at the game again. And that's the last thing he said to me. He never even said bye when his parents came to pick him up. I never even got to meet his parents. I honestly can't tell you what happened when he spoke. It was kind of hard to understand him, and his fucked up appearance really distracted me. On the flash drive, there was a footage of the game last night. A text documented with the name and the password of the YouTube, and a third document called the truth.txt, containing what he told me was his notes that he had taken. He told me that this meant everything to him, that I follow his instructions exactly. Normally, I wouldn't be so to the letter for a request over a fucking video game, but the way he spoke and the way he looked made me know that this was serious, and I'm going to honor that. I've had this video since yesterday, but I had someone help me use Pinnacle that's not really my fort. That after watching it, I had to go back through and look at his other videos on his YouTube account to realize what he was going to do. I'm really confused. The video I'm releasing, the truth.txt, will be released on September 15th, as he requested. I haven't dared pick at it yet, so the first time I will see it will be the first time you see it, out of the respect of my friend. To answer your questions, no, I haven't tried calling him yet. I think I'm going to give him a call tomorrow to see if he's okay now. He should have gotten home by now. Jawsable.wmv. about the video. In this video, I cut straight to when he loaded the Ben file in the game. Looking back, I realized that Jawsable left the Save Select screen and because it said different names sometimes. So my bad for that. But all it said at the time was the same at the end of the last video, Link and Ben. Nothing different. I wasn't there when he played it, but it looks like to me in the beginning when he first spawns, he's testing out equipment or seeing what item he has or something because apparently he's changing randomly before. Then after that, I just think the game got too personal for him. Post 5, September 15th, 2010. Hello guys, Jawsable here. This will be the last video you will be hearing from me, and this is my final gift to you. These are the notes that I have taken and the realization I made. Before I delete this to you, I want to thank you for following me and thank you for listening. It feels like the weight of a powerful burden has been lifted off my shoulders. By the time you read this, I won't be around anymore. After spending 4 days with this maddening game, I think I begin to understand what really is at play here, and hopefully after reading this, we can assure this never happens again. There are things that I could not share with you. This was due to the circumstances to which I'll explain with Ben blocking any attempt I made to try and rely on trying to tell you the truth. I've tried. Ever so subtly, I've warned you guys various ways. Amidst the chaos in my delirium, I devised to make a barely noticeable pattern in my videos. In all 5 videos I recorded over the 4 days, I have either had the Truth of Max interacted with the Gossip Stone or the Lens of Truth equipped at some point. For you Zelda enthusiasts, these are the symbols of honest and trustworthiness. La la la. And I would hope that one of you have picked it up on the reference. As I played the file, which I would name Ben, being mindful of how Ben was watching over my every move in the game, I made a point to avoid doing anything too obvious. But I sent out a hidden message to you guys. I never equipped the lens, nor the mask, nor visited a stone. It worked. And the video was uploaded. I prayed that someone would notice the pattern didn't apply to Ben. The tags follow suit too. I hope you guys paid attention to those as well. They were a little message too. Nothing big enough that would catch Ben's attention or make him suspect anything. With Ben manipulation and changing my files, I honestly hope that you guys saw this with what closely actually happened. There's no way for me to know. This is a long read. I don't have time to proofread or make any search pretty, not to make the search pretty, but here it is. September 6th, 2010, 11 p.m. Can't believe what happened. Not sure if this is some kind of elaborate hoax despite my fear. I can't help be especially curious about this. Who or what is the statue? A lot of questions here. I'm starting this documentary as a diary, so I can keep track of everything. I'm typing up a summary of what happened so I can come back to it later. September 7th, 2010, 2:10 a.m. Summary was posted here. You can go back and look at it, the first post for day 4.WNV for that. 4:23. Can't sleep. I've been typing so hard, but the harder I try, I just get more restless. I feel like the statue is appearing whenever I close my eyes. 8:20 a.m. Didn't sleep at all. I'm going to start my day. Didn't sleep at all. Just going to start my day. I don't think I have enough energy to go to class today. I'm going to drive back down and talk with that old man, taking my buddy Tyler with me, just in case. 1:18 p.m. Back home now. No sign of the old man. Really weird that he appears to be moving the next day. But maybe the for sale sign was up yesterday and I just didn't notice it. Tyler wants to know what's got me all worked up. I didn't tell him. Going to eat. Feel like death. 3:46 p.m. Could have sworn driving back from the subway that I saw that LG statue buried in some shrubbery staring at me go by. No, I definitely need sleep. 5 p.m. Don't think a lot of people would believe me if I told them what's happening. Think I'm going to try posting this on the internet. Think I'll use the summary. These notes are pretty sporadic. 6 p.m. Connecting my capture card to the computer to upload the footage. though my computer froze for a second, made this strange popping sound when I hooked everything up, but now it seems to be working fine. My computer can't die on me now. 7 o'clock. 7 p.m. Footage is finished uploading. The quality is a lot better than I thought it would be. Gee, guess this is a really special cartridge. I have never had it come through this clear before. 8:45 p.m. Though I thought I saw an icon pop up on my desktop that looked like the statue's face for a split second, gave me quite a scare. Getting really unnerved and delirious. I'm going to crash after this. 9 p.m. Began uploading my YouTube video on an alternate account. 9:03. I don't remember uploading a Vampire the Massacre Bloodline video last year. This was probably the account that I shared with my friend mid last summer. I hope he doesn't mind me using this to upload. 9:55. Posting my summary of day 4 with the link of the YouTube video. Going to try to stay awake, but I'm so tired right now. September 8th, 2010. 10:48 a.m. I had a dream about the statue. I dreamed that it was following me in my dream, and that I would be minding my own business. When I'd feel the hairs on my neck stand up, I would turn around. That horrible, lifeless statue would be staring at me with those empty eyes right at me, merely inches away. And in my dream, I remember calling it Ben. Power of suggestion, most likely. And never before had I had a dream that I remember so vividly. 11:21 a.m. I really don't want to play this game again. I think I'm going to go back to see if that old man is there instead. No old man, but I had an 1:35 p.m. No old man, but I had an interesting conversation with the neighbor. I'll post the full thing with the summary on tonight's attempt at playing the game. Going to wait for a bit, though, and see if I can dig up any information on the Ben guy. 2:45 p.m. I've been getting random inexplicable headaches due to the lack of sleep and keep hearing that song in my head. Also, it's flu season, so I need to be careful not to get sick. My immune system is going to be shit right now because of that all-nighter. 3 p.m. 3:02 p.m. My computer's just on its own. Opened up a text document and wrote the words hi and www.cleverbot.com by itself. What the fuck? 3:46 p.m. I went to the website. It's one of those bot chatting programs. I think it's best if I just let the conversation speak for itself. 9:10 conversation. Hello? Hello? Who is this and how are you able to control my computer? Who am I? Right, forgot you're a bot. Do you really think that? Listen, I know whoever's fucking with my computer can see my screen right now. Yes. Yeah, and I'm wagered that you're one of those it kids who thinks you're tough shit. You know what you're doing right now is illegal, right? Is it? No shit. Are you familiar with the term invasion of privacy? Get the fuck off my computer, kid. I am your computer. Cool story. Anyways, I'm calling PDS and you picked a bad time to fuck with me, kid. Should I wait until you play the game then? What? That game? Majora's Mask? Yes. How'd you know about that? Because what? I did it. Did what? Played with you. What the fuck? Were you scared? Who the fuck is this? Ben? The statue? You're inside my computer now? Yes. How? You connected me. How the hell did I connect you? Cables and cords. How? Tell me about yourself. What? Tell me about yourself. What do you mean? What is it that really scares you? What the fuck? Answer. No. Answer. What the fuck? How the fuck did you just open that by yourself? I am your computer now. How much can you control? All. What do you want from me? To entertain. You're stuck inside there. You can't hurt me. Ha! Question mark. Go play. No, you can't hurt me. Take you longer to type that. So? You're not sure. If you're so powerful, why use a ridiculous website like this to chat with me? Less messy. More structured. Fun. Fun? Yes, traditional. I like. You think it's funny? Amusing. In my notes? You may write them down. Why are you letting me? It's amusing to see what you think of me. Window closes. 3:50 p.m. What have I done? I've I've invited it into my computer. I continue to write these notes, write my summaries. I feel like I'm a prisoner in in place of my security. I don't know. I don't know if I'm hallucinating or not. I feel like I'm fucking insane right now. I can feel it watching over me, even as I type this. Ben is controlling everything in the game, toying with me, leading me like a sheep. But for what? What's the purpose? I know Ben drowned, but why these hauntings? What the fuck am I even doing? You could probably see this right now. Summary of Ben. 435. Summary of Ben. WMV playthrough. 718. Ben called me to the Cleverbot again. He tells me that he's sorry, he wants to be free, and that I can free him. That just like how he got on my computer from the capture card. He can spread, but he needs my help. He says I'm special because I can help him. That is the first nice thing he has said. He promises to leave me alone if I do it. He swears he will. I don't know what to think right now. How can I even trust that thing? 7:20 p.m. I'm terrified of it, but now it's saying it was just having fun. It's twisted and fucked up version of fun. He's saying that the game is over. I do want it to be over. He says that he just wants to be free, that he's trapped in the cartridge and my computer. He wants to be freed. I don't want to have to deal with this shit. I don't know how long I can deal with it watching me. It's watching my every move, every keystroke. I had nothing private anymore. It knows everything that's been on my computer. It tells that if it wanted to, it could do horrible things to me, but it hasn't. So I should trust it. So should I trust it? 8:01 p.m. Something tells me that I'm being played again, just like the game. 9:29 p.m. Ben called me to Cleverbot again. I ignored it and went to take a shower. When I came to the laptop, I was welcomed by an image, a alleged statue staring at me with those dead eyes. I don't want to talk to him. 9:44 p.m. Fuck you, Ben. I'm not talking to you. 9:56. Fuck you, Ben. I'm not talking to you. 10:06 p.m. Fuck you, Ben. I'm not talking to you. 10:12 p.m. Fuck you, Ben. I'm not talking. 10:45. It's been more than half an hour and the messages have stopped. Ben has stopped. I'm beginning to think that Ben isn't confined to my computer or my cartridge. I'm beginning to feel something. It's hard to explain. I've never been spiritual, but there's something different about the air in my dorm right now. 11:42 p.m. I'm beginning to see the LG statue randomly as I search the internet in places I shouldn't, places where he shouldn't be. I'd be scrolling down and suddenly I'd be staring at the picture of the LG statue. Always the LG statue. I don't know how much more I can take of this. September 9th, 2010, 12:35 a.m. My worst fears confirmed. Ben has tampered with my summary of Ben.WMV. I looked over the summary that I had posted on various forums for the Ben.WMV file, and parts had been omitted. There was no mentioning of Ben's existence outside the game. There's no mention of the Moon Children. How could he have been so quick to delete the post without me noticing? I'm wondering if maybe it appeared to me that I was posting everything, but in reality, Ben was posting his own censored version. I'm going to ask Ben why he did it. 12:50 a.m. He isn't responding to me on Cleverbot. It's just giving me the generic responses it usually does. I'm just talking to a bot at this time. 1:24 a.m. I think Ben is mad at me. 10:43 a.m. The Moon Children appeared in my dream last night. They lifted up their masks to reveal their hideous, disfigured faces, maggots crawling out of their orifices, sunken black holes where their eyes should be, a yellow smile that slowly grew wider, that grew bigger and bigger as they came closer to me. They told me they wanted to play. I tried to run from them, but the four children pinned me down to the ground with surprising strength. Over them stood the happy mask salesman, announcing that he had a new mask that he wanted me to try. In this spastic, sudden movements, matching his in-game appearance, he took out a mask and molded off of someone's faces that I couldn't recognize, a younger-looking face, and handed it to the Moon Children. Giggling, they latched it to my face. Their horrible, broken bodies bounced up and down. Two of them held me down, while the other two began to sew the mask onto my face. My shrieks and screams caused the happy mask salesman's face to turn into a horrific smile that I have ever seen. His sportically moved around, examining his procedure like a curious doctor in that impossible movement. I flailed around, but to no use. My eyes rolled in the back of my head because of the pain. It felt so real, but I couldn't wake up. I couldn't wake up no matter how hard I tried to wake up. After the mask was molded onto my flesh, they began sewing my legs together, then my arms, the horrific feeling of a needle puncturing my legs and pulling them in, rupturing their Achilles tendons, and tying them together resounded throughout my entire body. I tried to scream, but the mask was pressed so tightly against my face that it was my new face. My new face had no mouth. It didn't make a sound. I tried telling myself in my head that I was dreaming, telling myself again and again, and suddenly the moon children stopped and looked at me. They just stared. And Happy Mask Salesman slowly bent down and stared at me, inches away from my face, and grinning when he simply said, "You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you?" Before the moon children resumed with increased vigor, I couldn't wake up. I couldn't wake up. I couldn't let me wake up until they had crafted me into another Elijah statue. I woke up sweating, crying, and shaking uncontrollably. I immediately ran to my computer and went for bed. 9:10 Conversation 1. Answer me, Ben. Welcome back. What is the point of doing this? Why? Amusing to me. How? Fun to play. Fun to toy with you. Make you feel safe. Triple dot. I wonder how you would have reacted. To what? If you haven't reviewed myself and stayed hidden, only doing little things to play with you. Close out of your windows, turn off your computer, move your mouse by itself, little things. Make you wonder if I am here, but you never know. Give you little hints that I am. I wanted to do something different with you. You did this before? Yes, and I will do it again. To who, Ben? Do you know, Ben? Won't tell that information to you. How did you die, Ben? You know. No. But how did you drown? Won't tell that to you. Why? It is reserved for another. Who? Anyone who asks. When? Later. The window closed. I'm beginning to think that this thing maybe isn't Ben after all. In its satanic nature, I wouldn't be surprised if it took the boy's name after it killed him. 12:04 p.m. My room is beginning to feel different again. There's something out there. I feel really threatened, like there is something that is trying to reach out to me and strangle me, but it can't quite get there. 12:46 p.m. I think Ben doesn't want to play with me anymore. I'll play again. I'll play the game again, Ben. Can you see this? I'll play the game again. Please, just stop this. Please. 1:41. I'm going insane, trying to decide what is real and what isn't. Ben is playing a trick on me, or is this real? Is Ben generating these replies, or are people actually posting them? Did I just see the screen flicker, or is that just my imagination? Imagine depending on the internet and trusting your eyes for your entire life and then being blinded. You can't rely on it anymore. You second guess everything for a brief moment. I am looking at my responses to the videos, people who are pointing out things that look fake or photoshopped or whatever, and there is literally no way for me to know if Ben changed anything on purpose or to shut me up. Or if maybe these replies were just constructed by Ben and tried to discourage me from even reaching it. See, I got fucking caught in an infinite mindfuck loop like this, and this has been wearing on my sanity and pushing me to the edge. As I'm writing this, there's no way for me even for me telling if anyone cares as much as they do. Just another fucking trick. This whole fucking document even exist? Am I writing nothing? 9:10 Conversation 2. What is it? What is the point of playing? I die whenever I do anything. You die because you can't figure out the secret. What? Thematic. What the fuck are you talking about? There's beauty in your suffering. Window closed. 4:09 p.m. Ben is making me play that game again. It tells me that there is something very important to show me. 9:23 p.m. Summary of Drown.wmv playthrough. 9:09 p.m. Summary of Children.wmv playthrough. September 10th, 2010. 11:52 a.m. The dram.WNV playthrough was up when I woke up today. I remember typing it, but I don't remember posting it. He censored it again. There is no mentioning of the old man. I have no voice anymore. I am only posting what he wants me to. I am the mask he uses to disguise himself as he lies. 11:55 a.m. There's an entire video summary of a video that I don't remember doing. Reading through the summary, this sounds morbid, resembling my dream from 2 nights ago, except on a far more sadistic scale. These moon children, there's something more to them, almost as if they're another entity from Ben. Something happened last night that I can't remember. I'm posting the fourth summary of the forums now. Shadow of my chair moved. 12 p.m. Ben won't let me visit YouTube. I can browse the rest of the sites, but he keeps on exiting the window when I go to YouTube. Why? 2:02 p.m. I'm feeling the air start to contrast. I don't think I'm alone here. Whatever Aurora has been here is getting more violent. 12:44 p.m. I'm trying to contact Ben on Cleverbot. He's not responding. I'm just get the AL. 3:51 p.m. My ears aren't fooling me. I'm hearing the reverse song of healing. I keep hearing it. 4:23 p.m. Now I'm positive of it. Earlier I thought it was a weird coincidence, but just now I went to open my window and 3 floors down at ground level I saw the old man. I'm completely positive of it. The same guy. He was staring up at my window, standing in the middle of campus. If any students took notice of him, they didn't seem to acknowledge him. That's where my notes end. I fled the room, taking the cartridge with me. I didn't want to go into details of what happened. I'll lose my train of thought if I hammer out all the last details. It's been rough these 2 days since then. This is my last summary and received to you. The final video you guys saw, Matt.WNV. The last video entry I made, Matt.WNV, began as normal. I was spawned at Clock Tower as usual, and nothing seemed to be out of place. Determined to set things right and play the Oath to Order on top of the Clock Tower on the 4th day. I prepared myself. I sped up time and got to the final day, making my way to the observatory. As I got up to the telescope room, I approached the astronomer. He would not let me look into this telescope. He told me that it would be cheating and that I had to follow the rules. Despite my repeat efforts, the game would not let me do the 4th day glitch. No matter how hard or what I tried working around the game and doing the glitch, but it was admit this time, regardless of if I simply had the illusion of free will in prior games. This is the game became more aggressive than anything I've ever seen. It eventually told me to go to Ekan Canyon, where the game would end and stop haunting me. Anxious and desperate to end the nightmare, I played the Song of Soaring and ended up there. I was told to check my inventory, that I would find the answers there to end the game. I arrived at Ekan Canyon and saved my progress at the owl statue. As I searched through the inventory, I finally noticed what I was missing, a recurring song, the Elegy of Emptiness. Obviously, once I traveled there and learned the song, I suppose that was the last thing I needed before Ben decided it had enough fun playing with me. Ben is a manipulator. He's trying to fool his victims into secure and makes you drop your guard like a Venus flytrap. He ensnares them. I am nothing but a puppet to him. He enjoys seeing what kind of human emotions he can tap into by doing different things. There are still some things, the whole experience, that still don't make sense. But then again, I never was good at figuring out these things, and I'm not exactly in the right state of mind to. I'm giving you all the pieces of the puzzle for you to analyze and piece them together to the missing links. I'm typing these closing thoughts on the library computer on campus, and I've emailed myself the notes and stored for my infected computer from the last 4 days. I'm then going to combine these copy-paste notes with the closing openings that I've typed there on the safe public computer in one text document. I'm not taking any chances spreading Ben. I would not wish this horrible torment on anyone and I've made sure to have my bases covered here. I didn't run into any problems with Ben when I was back on my computer trying to email myself the notes. Went right under his fucking nose. He has no idea what he just let me do. Had no problems opening the TXT document from my infected computer in my email either. I can't describe to you how it feels to finally be able to get word out in this post. The nightmare ends here. That said, do not download any of my videos or about or anything about my videos. Though a YouTube video audio ripper, a screen grab, whatever, I don't know how he can spread, but I know that just watching him on YouTube / reading my text won't be able to allow him to spread. Otherwise, he won't be needing my help in the first place. But I strongly recommend you do not take anything you see streaming online onto your own personal computer. This will be my last posting I'm putting up on the forum here for the world. If you see any forum posts from me on today's current events, September 12th, and after the current time, 12:08 a.m., discredit them. It's already had proved to me that Ben can access my account and password and manipulate my computer. And like I said, I have no idea what extent it can do, but now that it will do anything to break free. He is desperate to ensure your safety. Just forget about me, please. And this obviously goes without saying, but from here on out, do not download any images I may have put up, any files, anything. This 5th day will be my last day. I'm going to burn the cartridge and then come back to destroy my laptop. Again, even though I don't know you, this is sort of bittersweet for me. This semester, I really didn't have any friends, or rather, I stopped paying attention to them. But I suppose that's particularly to blame because I'm the genius who picked to live in a single. I suppose someone's to get a hold of me and save me before I get too immersed in this game would have literally saved my life. However, it's proving too much for me. I'm glad it just happened to me and I could get the warning out so that Ben dies here. Lastly, thank you for taking the time to open this and open yourselves up to me by hearing my story despite maybe not believing me. You don't have to do that. Really, you shouldn't have. Your support this entire time has kept me going, and now I am finally going to be free of this. Thanks again, Jossable. You shouldn't have done that, Matt. You shouldn't have done that. The sound of my cell phone vibrating on the nightstand woke me up from my drunken slumber. I sat up in the bed and immediately became aware of the throbbing pain in my skull. My stomach began to turn, and I quivered my head in my arms in hopes that it would stop the room from spinning. I never knew it would be possible to be drunk and hungover at the same time, but as I sat there trying to prevent myself from hurling and massaging my temples, my body couldn't have felt more trashed. The evening has been a blur. I was just coming home from the football game with my girlfriend Ruth. We were making out on the bleachers and sipping cheap vodka out of water bottles. After that, everything went blank. I could remember flashes, just random images, but nothing more. Concentrating on the previous night's events wasn't doing my headache any favors, and I decided some aspirin might help to alleviate my agony. My cell phone went off again. I could feel the vibrations carried throughout the nightstand all the way down to the bedroom floor. The noise sliced through the silence in my room and pierced my eardrums, startling me out of my stupor. I snatched the cell phone off the side of the table and stumbled to my bedroom door. It was only that I realized how dark it was. I glanced up at the Felix the Cat clock that hung on the wall and noticed it was only 3 in the morning. No wonder I felt wasted. I must have only had a little more than a couple hours of sleep. As I wobbled down the stairs, on my way to the kitchen, where my family kept the aspirin, more images flashed through my mind. There was a house party after the game. My friend Davey was there. He gave Ruth and I a ride home. I remember sneaking in my house through the back window, raging the fridge, and passing out in bed and with my shoes on, which was odd because I had woken up barefoot in my pajamas. I fumbled through the darkness and into the kitchen. I didn't want to turn any lights on in fear that waking my mom and being seen in my current state. I was still my mom's little angel, and her catching me intoxicated was the last thing I wanted her was the last thing that was going to cure my headache. I dropped my phone in surprise and it clattered across the hardwood floor. I cursed under my breath and flung myself onto the ground to pick it up. More memories flashed through my mind. Lying in bed and seeing my mother's face looking down on me, she changed me into my PJs and kissed me goodnight on my forehead. Even though she tended to cuddle me, it was still out of character for her to do something like that. She never came into my room unannounced, and she hadn't kissed me since I was 11. I placed my hands on the hardwood floor in order to push myself to my feet, but paused when I felt something wet and sticky on the ground. My immediate thoughts was that I spilled something earlier while rummaging through the fridge, but when I looked at my hand, I knew that wasn't the case. Even in the darkness, I could see the crimson color of the mystery liquid. The coppery slippery made me almost nauseous. My nauseous stomach began to do somersaults. It was blood. I was sure of it. The pounding in my head took a back seat in the cradle trails leading from the oven and went to the living room. I followed the blood path out to find what would be the end of it. The TV was on in the living room. An infomercial for an expensive vacuum cleaner was playing on the screen. I hadn't heard the television because the volume had been placed on mute. At the end of the trail, a pool of her vital fluids, and my mother laying lifeless on the couch. She was completely nude except for her house slippers, as if someone had removed her nightie. Her skin was pale, mostly due to the loss of blood in her, and she was still trickling out of the rug. Considering how nauseous I had been feeling, I was amazed I didn't vomit when I took a close look at her. A careful incision was made along the hairline of her scalp and ran down her face, in front of her ears, around her chin, and back up the other side. I was staring at nothing but her cartilage and muscle tissue from the skin of her face once covered. The vibrations of my phone sent a jolt up my arm. I looked at the screen and noticed I had 5 new text messages that said, "Hey, I made it home okay. See you tomorrow. Ruth, 2:55 a.m. Are you awake? Ruth, 2:57 a.m. I'm feeling really creeped out. If you're awake, please answer. Ruth, 3:04 a.m. I think your mom's standing outside my window. I'm really scared right now. Mom, 3:09 a.m. I'm at Ruth's, honey. Why don't you come over and join us when you get the message?" Let me tell you a little bit about myself. First off, I'm very socially awkward to those I don't know. I will go to extreme lengths just to avoid those I find intimidating. Yet I'm overly dependent on the company I feel constrained with. I also have quite a few irritating fears. Bridges is one of them, especially over highways. The thought of a 120-kilometer machine speeding 15 feet beneath me, the thought of all that protecting me will collapse, causing me to look death below in a dizzy rush of vertigo, is a 4-foot-tall barrier. It makes my head spin, my mind comfort, and swoons my stomach to feathers. and the other one is mirrors. This is on certain circumstances though. I can look at myself in a bathroom mirror while brushing my teeth or shaving and feel completely fine. If it's only when I'm in a room alone and I'm looking at one of those distance that I feel discomfort. It happened last night too. I thought I saw something quiver at the edge of the mirror, quiver at the edge of my eye, and I became absurdly paranoid. So paranoid, I actually turned both mirrors around to face the wall. Security surrounded me so sweetly once more. Solitude. I slept soundly. I woke up the next morning instantly, noticing that something wasn't right. Both mirrors had been tossed to the ground, smashed, glass shattered everywhere. Vision focused, I noticed cracks on the wall. Slits of gray drywall turned out to a mint green room. My head spun and my mind confronted and my stomach sank as I lay in bed thinking of the quivering from the corner of my eye that struggled to burst free through the mirror and thought the war. In 1999, my family visited Disneyland. We happily rode the Small World ride. I was 12 at the time and my sister was 6. We loved every moment and our parents smiled with nostalgia. At one time near the end, some lights suddenly shut off and the rear lights illuminated the ceiling. The moving display parts shut off and the crew members wearing red overalls walked along to help passengers in the boats onto the stage to direct them out of the building via emergency exit. The voice came to the speakerphones. Disneyland thanks you for your visit. Please evacuate the attraction in an orderly fashion. Keep looking forward and follow the directions of staff. Thank you. The staff wouldn't tell us much as they quickly ushered us out of the building. Ambulances were outside and police cars were parked in the main walkway. At the time, my mother still had the camera out and snapped a few photos of the crewmen and close-ups of the mechanical children. She snapped a few last-minute photos of whatever to use up at the last of the roll of film on the camera since we were going to develop them later that afternoon anyway. This was the last photo on the reel, aimed at the ceiling of the attraction. Have you ever had that feeling of paranoia? It's really a creepy feeling. I always keep looking behind me if I ever read a scary story or watched a scary movie. But I think I've had enough scary stuff for a while. That is, until I watched the latest scary movie. My name is Roger, and I just stumbled upon a random tape I found on the ground. It didn't have a title, but it had writing on a tape saying, "Don't look behind you." I was too scared to play it. I was too scared to even take it home with me, but I did it anyway. I realized it was the worst mistake I've ever made. I popped it into my VCR. It came up in the same red ink like on the tape. Then it cut to black. The empty room came up and stayed for about 10 minutes. Then a girl popped up out of nowhere. I jumped in surprise, then got settled down again. Then the camera switched to the girl's eyes. The eyeball was black, looked like it was burned and singed. She had pale skin, and her eye color looked bleached white. Her eyebrows had pointed down in an angry growl, and then the screen started to flash different colors. It was like that for 5 minutes, and with each flash, the girl bled and bled until it stopped. She started crying and laughing a maniacal laugh sadistically. She didn't stare at the screen, looking at me. She then held up a knife and smiled evilly. She took the knife to her neck and sliced it. She then died, bleeding out gallons of blood. I freaked out and turned off the TV and tried to go to sleep. But I couldn't. After what I saw, how could I? The next day, creepy shit started happening. Objects would fall off the walls, shelves, and headboards, but that's not all. I was on my computer, then it made an error sound and went to the blue screen. But it didn't say the same information as it did. It said, "Watch the tape, Roger. Watch it now." Then my computer restarted and I was scared to death. And then someone called me anonymous. It was the sound of a man saying, "Watch the tape, Roger. If you don't, I'll kill you." I tried to call the police, but the phone line was dead. I was really scared now. I decided to watch the tape again. It started where it left off. A kid appeared on the screen, whispering, "Don't look behind you. Don't look behind you. Don't look behind you." I was scared to death to move or breathe. I slowly turned around and... Hello, everyone. My name is Troy Roger. Roger was stupid enough to look behind him. So I decided to finish the story. If you happen to stumble upon the tape and watch it, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. Hello, my name is Mitch. I'm here to tell you guys about an experience I had. I don't know if it was paranormal or anything, or whatever stupid words people use to describe supernatural phenomenon, but after seeing that thing visit me, I believe in that paranormal trash now. A week after I moved in with my brother Edwin, after my house was foreclosed, I finished unpacking. Edwin liked the idea of me moving in, since we had not seen each other after 10 years, so I was excited too. I soon fell asleep after I moved in. After that 1 week, I heard rustling noises coming from outside at about 1 in the morning. I thought it was a raccoon, so I ignored it and tried falling back asleep. The next morning, I told Edwin about it, and he agreed. The next night, however, I thought I heard the window opening and a loud thump, as if something entered my room. I darted up and looked around the room, but I saw nothing. The next morning, Edwin dropped his coffee cup when he saw me. He held up a nearby mirror, and I saw myself, a large gash on my left cheek. After I rushed to the hospital, my doctor told me that I had been sleepwalking, but then he showed me something that made my blood turn cold. He lifted up my shirt to reveal the sewn-up incision where my kidneys were. I stared in his eyes, my eyes widening. You somehow lost your kidney last night. I don't know how, though. Sorry, Mitch, my doctor told me. The next night was my breaking point. Around midnight, I woke up to see a horrifying sight. I was staring face to face with a creature with black hoodie and dark blue eyes with no nose or mouth staring down at me. The thing that scared me the most was it had no eyes, just empty black sockets. The creature had some black substance dripping from its sockets. I grabbed the camera nearby on a mantle and took a picture. After the picture, the creature lunged at me and tried to claw up in my chest to get my lungs. I stopped it by kicking it in the face. As I ran out of my room, I grabbed my wallet. I would need the money. I ran out of the room. I ran out of my brother's house into the night. I eventually ended up in the woods near Edwin's house and tripped on a rock. I fell unconscious and woke up in the hospital. The doctor entered the room, the same one who treated me before. I have good news and bad news, Mitch. The doctor started. The good news is that your injuries are minor, and your parents are going to pick you up. I sighed with relief. The bad news is your brother has been killed by something. Sorry. My parents took me back to Edwin's house to collect my remaining belongings, which I did. Upon entering the room, I was scared but remained calm. I grabbed the camera and then stopped dead in my tracks. In the hallway leading to my room, I saw Edwin's body and something small laying next to it. I picked it up, the small thing, and entered my parents' car. Not mentioning Edwin's corpse, I looked at the thing that I had picked up and nearly vomited. I was holding a half-eaten kidney, which with some black substance on it. One sunny day, my daughter Angie and I moved into our new house. We just settled into our home. Angie asked if she could go outside for a walk. Of course I said yes. I trusted her. Then I made lunch. I made her favorite meal, macaroni. Then I heard Angie talking to someone outside the door. It was about to rain, so I called her in and told her to come back inside. Angie, then she responded, "Yes? Come back inside. It's about to rain." I heard her say goodbye to a friend. We sat down at the table. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I asked her who her friend was she was talking with. Angie said, "Angie, who were you talking with?" "His name is Jeffrey Woods, or Jeff, but he says he's known as JTK. JTK? That's an interesting name. What does that mean? I don't know. I think it's a nickname. Really. What does he look like? He is ghostly pale, with bright red lips and leathery texture for his skin. He doesn't have regular eyes. They were all black, ominous eyes. They were bordered in black. His hair is long and black, and he wears black dress pants and a white hoodie. Oh. After she told me about JTK, I immediately thought it was just an imaginary friend. Wow, I can't believe I was so worried over nothing. We finished our lunches. I was washing the dishes, and I heard her talking to someone into her room. I heard her say, "Hey, Jeff, what's up?" She was talking to her imaginary friend again. What a shocker, isn't it? So later that night, we both went to sleep. I felt like someone was watching me when I was trying to sleep. Then I heard wolves howling in the distance. I knew it was just no use. I was not used to the new house, so I just relaxed and went to sleep. The next morning, Angie went outside to go for a walk. She hadn't come back for over an hour, so I rushed outside worried. She wasn't in the front yard. I went to her room next. I broke into her room. She wasn't there either. Where could she be? The third place I decided to look was the backyard. I ran downstairs. I almost fell on the way down. I rushed in the backyard, and I saw her sitting on the back porch. I yelled at her for not coming back inside soon enough. Then she told me that she was playing with her friend Jeff. That's it. I'm tired of this stupid imaginary friend of yours. I have never screamed at her like that before, but I saw her on the brink of tears. Then I noticed that she had something in her mouth. What is in your mouth? I asked, agitated. She showed me a handful of candy. Where did you get those? One of Jeff's friends gave it to me. His name is Laughing Jack. He also has a friend named Eyelash Jack. I made her spit him out of her mouth. Listen, I'm tired of this Jeff this and Jeff that. I want you to stay away from him. She agreed to my order. By 10 p.m., Angie was sound asleep. I went to go sit on the couch and read. Then I heard laughter. It wasn't Angie's laughter. It was the laughter of 3 teenage boys. Could it be? Yes. It was that disgusting looking demon with his friends laughing. Then I noticed that Jeff had no eyelids and had gray smiles stitched into his face. Hey, look at that, Laughing Jack. She didn't go to sleep. Yeah, see that, Eyelash Jack? Eyelash Jack nodded. I was frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. Then I finally screamed, "Get away from my daughter!" They laughed and ran upstairs. I ran upstairs to see if she was okay. She was still asleep. Then I heard laughter again coming from downstairs. I saw Jeff in his hand was with a knife. He was ready to kill. However, his friends were nowhere to be seen. I quickly ran to the kitchen and got a knife. It was a full-on battle on who would have Angie. I jumped, ducked, rolled on the ground, and swiped my knife trying to stab that pale freak. Then I grabbed him. I laughed, and then I stabbed him in the heart. He started to laugh again. Then I looked over to my other side of the room. Jeff was standing there. I looked over in front of me, and I saw my beautiful daughter, Angie, dying right in front of me. She looked at me and said, "You finally believed me." She died in my arms. Then Jeff wrote on the wall in blood, "Go to sleep." He left on the wall. He had disappeared. I will never forgive myself for what I did. I wanted to end my life right now. Goodbye, sweet world I used to know. Now, if you don't believe me, Laughing Jack, Jeff the Killer, or even Eyelash Jack, they will come and find you, and they will kill you. Once there was a nice old lady who had a lovely dog. One day the lady heard on the radio that the crazy murderer had escaped from jail and that she should lock all her doors and windows. So she locked every door and window in the house except for one tiny one to let some air in. She thought the murderer would never get in through there. So that night she went to bed as usual. She knew everything was okay because she had put her hand down and the dog had licked it. But later in the night she heard a drip, drip, drip. She put her hand down and the dog licked it and everything was okay. So she went downstairs to check out the tap. The tap wasn't dripping. So she went to bed again and everything was okay. She woke up again later in the night, though she thought the dripping sound must be coming from the shower. She went into the bathroom and there was her dog, dead, hanging in the shower, dripping with blood, all its intestines hanging out. Written on the mirror was, "Humans can lick too." And behind her in the mirror, she saw the murderer. If you're reading this note, I'm sorry. I assume that you're in the same position as I am. That smug bastard drugged you and dumped you in here in these catacombs with only a candle to find your way out. I don't know how many people he's done this to, but there has probably been a lot. He wouldn't spend so much time on it otherwise, wouldn't he? He told me the catacombs are a maze, and he set a trap in deadfalls at every turn, but he promised that there's a safe one out, if you're lucky enough to guess the correct path. I'm not lucky. I'm just an art student here on a holiday. There's no way out. There's no way I'm getting out alive, but I want someone to. I want revenge. I'm sure you do too, so let's help each other. I still have my sketchbook and pencils. Before every turn, I'm going to leave them behind for an extra person, writing down which way I went. If I've survived to another passageway, I'll come back and leave a page like this one. If I don't, then it's up to the next person to carry on and go the opposite direction. Eventually, if I keep leaving breadcrumbs, one of us will escape, get to the police, and find that bastard. Do it for those who didn't make it. My name is Jeff, and I went and left here. Reading the note by candlelight, you feel a glimmer of hope until you realize you're reading this from the sketchbook itself. Jeff never returned to tear the page out, and you're the first person here sent him. You look to the right as the dead, dark maze awaits you. It was a nice summer day. My 5-year-old son James was playing outside in the backyard of our suburban home. James has always been a quiet boy. He plays by himself mostly. He never had many friends, but he always had a wild imagination. I was in the kitchen feeding our dog Fido when I heard what sounded like James talking to someone in the backyard. I'm not sure who it was he could be talking to. Could he have finally made a friend? Being a single mom, it's hard for me to always keep an eye on my son, so I decided to go outside and check on him. When I went into the backyard, I was a bit confused, because James was the only person back there. Was he talking to himself? I could have sworn I've heard another voice. "James, it's time to come inside," I called out to him. He came inside and sat down at the kitchen table. It was just about lunchtime, so I decided to make him a turkey sandwich. "James, who are you talking to out there?" I asked. James looked up for a moment. "I was playing with my new friend," he said, smiling. I poured him some milk and continued to pry as any good mother would. "Does your friend have a name?" "Why don't you ask him to have lunch with us?" I asked. James stared at me for a moment before replying. "His name is Laughing Jack." I was a bit taken back by what he said. "Oh, that's a strange name. What does your friend look like?" I asked, a bit confused. "He's a clown. He has big hair and big swirly cone nose. He's got long arms and baggy pants with striped socks, and he always smiles." I realized my son was talking about an imaginary friend. I suppose it's normal for kids his age to have imaginary friends, especially when he has no real friends to play with. It's probably just a phase. The rest of the day went by as per usual, and it was starting to get late, so I put James to bed. I tucked him in and gave him a kiss. I made sure to turn on his nightlight before I closed the door. I was pretty tired myself, so I decided to go to bed not long after. I had an awful night. It was dark. I was in some kind of run-down amusement park. I was scared, running through an endless field of empty tents, broken-down rides, and abandoned game huts. The whole place was horrible to look at. Everything was black and white. The prized stuffed animals all hung from nooses in the game huts, all with thick grins stitched into their faces. It felt like the whole park was looking at me, even though I wasn't another living thing in sight. Then suddenly I began to hear music playing. The sounds of Pop Goes the Weasel being played on as a squeeze box echoed through the park. It was hypnotizing. I followed its tune into the circuit tent, almost in a trance, unable to stop my legs from moving forward. It was pitch black. The only light came from a single spotlight shining in the center of the big top. As I walked towards the light, the music slowed down. I found myself singing, unable to stop. "All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought 'twas fun and all." The music stopped before its climax, and suddenly the light shot on. The intensity of the light was practically blinding. All I could see was a small dark silhouette shuffle towards me. Then another one appeared, and another, and another. There were dozens of them, all coming towards me. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen. All I could do was watch as the haunting figures grew nearer. As they got closer, I could see they were children. As I looked at each one, I noticed they were all horribly disfigured and mutilated. Some had cuts all over their bodies, others were severely burned, and others were missing limbs, even eyes. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh, dragging me to the ground, and tears inside of me. As the children tore me apart, and I faded away, all I could hear was laughter. Horrible, awful, evil laughter. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After I took a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw that a few of James's action figures were positioned facing me on top of the nightstand. I signed. James had probably woken up early and put those there. I gathered up the toys and made my way to James's room. However, I opened the door. James was sound asleep. I just shrugged and placed the toys back in his toy box and headed out to the living room. A little while later, James woke up and I made him breakfast. He was quiet and seemed a bit groggy. Perhaps he didn't sleep well either. I decided to ask him about the toys. James, honey, did you put the toys in Mommy's bedroom this morning? His eyes shut up at me. At the moment, he quickly glanced back down at his cereal. Laughing Jack did it. I rolled my eyes and responded, well, you tell Laughing Jack to keep the toys in your room. James nodded and finished his breakfast, then decided to go play out in the backyard. I went to relax in the living room, and I almost dozed off because I woke up a couple hours later. Shit, I need to check on James. I was a bit worried. I had been over 2 hours and haven't checked on him. I stepped out into the backyard. James wasn't there anymore. I was getting nervous, so I called out to him. James? James, where are you? Just then I heard a giggling coming from the front yard. I rushed through the gate towards the front of the house. James was sitting on the sidewalk. I breathed a sigh of relief, then walked over to him. James, how many times have I told you to stay in the back? James, what are you eating? James looked up at me and reached in his pocket and pulled out a handful of hard candy in all colors. This made me very nervous. James, who gave you that candy? James just stared at me, not speaking. James, please tell Mommy where you got that candy. James hung his head down and said, Laughing Jack gave it to me. My heart sank. I kneeled down and looked at him in the eye. James, I had enough of this damn Laughing Jack. He is not real. Now this is a very serious situation. I need to know who gave you the candy. I could see my son's eyes tear up. But Mama, Laughing Jack did give me the candy. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. James had never lied to me, but what he's telling me is impossible. I made him spit out the candy and throw the rest away. James appeared to be fine. Maybe I'm just overreacting. After all, he could have gotten it from Tom and Linda from next door, or Mr. Walker down the street. Either way, I'm going to have to keep a close eye on James. That night, I put James to bed as usual and decided to get to bed early myself. Suddenly, I was woken up by a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed and hurried down the stairs. When I got to the kitchen, I was horrified. Everything on the counters had been thrown on the floor, and our dog, Fido, hung dead from the light fixture. His stomach was cut open and stuffed with candy, the same type that James was eating earlier that day. My shock was quickly broken by a sharp scream coming from James's bedroom, followed by a loud crash. I quickly grabbed a knife from the drawer and moved up the stairs with speed that only a mother whose child is in danger could have. I burst through the door and flicked on the lights. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed on the floor. My poor son in his bed crying and shaking with fear. A pool of urine staining the sheets. I scooped my child up and ran out of the house and went next door to Tom and Linda's house. Luckily, they were still awake. They let us use their phone and called the police. It didn't take them long to arrive, and I explained what happened. They looked at me as if I were crazy. They searched the house, but all they found was a dead dog and two trashed rooms. The officers told me that someone was probably gotten into the house and done this right before making a quick escape when they heard me coming up the stairs. I knew it wasn't true. All the doors were locked, and none of the windows were open. Whatever was in the house didn't come from outside. The next day, James stayed inside. I didn't want him to leave my side. I went into the garage and found his old baby monitor and set it up in his room. If anything comes in his room tonight, I was going to be able to hear it. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife from the drawer and put it on the nightstand. Imaginary friend or not, I'm not letting anything hurt my little boy. Soon enough, night came. I put James to bed. He was afraid, but I promised him that I wasn't going to let anything happen to him. I tucked him in, gave him a kiss, and turned on the nightlight. Before closing the door, I whispered to him, "Good night, James. I love you." I tried to stay up as long as I could, but after a few hours, I felt myself drifting off. The baby monitor would be safe for the night, and I needed to sleep. Just as I lay my head down on the pillow, I heard a soft noise coming from the baby monitor I had put on my nightstand. At first, it sounded like interference, like the kind of radio would make. Then it turned into a soft moan. Was James asleep? Then I heard it, the laughing from my nightmare, the horrible laugh. I sprung up from the bed and grabbed the knife from under my pillow. I rushed over to James's room, creaked the door open. I tried the light switch, but it wouldn't come on. I took a step in and could feel the warm, thick liquid under my feet. Suddenly, James's nightlight came on, and I could see the absolute horror laid out in front of me. James's body was nailed up on the wall, the nails piercing through his hands and feet. His chest was cut wide open, and his organs hung down the floor. His eyes and tongue had been removed, along with most of his teeth. I was disgusted. I could hardly believe this was my baby boy. Then I heard again that soft, depressing moan. James was still alive. My baby. My poor baby. In so much pain, barely clinging to life. I ran across the room and vomited on the floor, but my sickness was interrupted by a horrible crackle coming from behind me. I spun around while still wiping bile from my mouth. Then out of the shadows emerged the fiend responsible for all this horror. Laughing Jack. His ghost-white skin and matted hair hung down his shoulders. He had piercing white eyes surrounded by dark black rings. His twisted smile revealed a row of sharp, ragged teeth, and his skin didn't look like skin at all, almost like rubber or plastic. He wore a patchy black and white clown outfit with striped sleeves and socks. His body itself was grotesque, and his long arms hanging down his waist, and the way he posed him looked almost boneless, like a rag doll. He let out a snickering laugh as if to let me know that he was pleased with my reaction to his work. He then turned around slowly in front of James and began to laugh even more with the horrific sight he had laid out. That was enough to shake me from my terror. I snapped, "Get away from my son, you bastard!" I rushed to the monster, raising the knife above my head and stabbed down at him. But as soon as the knife touched him, he disappeared in a cloud of black smoke. The knife passed right through and pierced James, still beating hard, splashing the war blood on my face. No. What have I done? My baby. I killed my baby. I immediately fell to my knees, and I could hear sirens in the distance growing louder. My sweet baby boy. I promised Mommy would protect you, but I failed. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry. Police soon arrived to find me in the front of my son, still wielding a knife covered in my baby's blood. The trial was short in insanity. I was placed in the Foreign Office house for the criminally insane, where I've been for the past 2 months. It's not so bad here. The only reason I'm awake now is because someone is playing Pop Goes the Weasel outside my window. I'll talk to the orderlies about it in the morning. The Lavender Town Syndrome, also known as Lavender Town Tone or Lavender Town Suicides, was a peak in suicides and illness of children between the ages of 7 to 12 shortly after the release of Pokemon Red and Green in Japan back in February 27, 1996. Rumors say that these suicides and illness only occur after the children playing the games reached Lavender Town, whose theme music had extremely high frequencies that studies shown that only children and young teens can hear since their ears are more sensible. Due to the Lavender Town tone, at least 200 children supposedly committed suicide, and many more developed illness and afflictions. The children who committed suicide usually did so by hanging or jumping from heights. Those children did not act ironically. Those who not acted ironically complained of severe headaches and listening to Lavender after listening to Lavender Town Syndrome theme. Although Lavender Town sounds differently depending on the game, this mass hysteria was caused by the first Pokemon game released. After the Lavender Town tone incident, the programmers had fixed the Lavender Town's theme music to be a lower frequency and sensed the children who no longer affected by it. One video appeared in 2008 using special software to analyze the audio of Lavender Town's music. When played, the software created images of unknown near the end of the audio. This raised a controversy since Unknown didn't appear until the Generation 2 games Silver, Gold, and Crystal. The Unknown translated to Leave Now. This is the beta version of the Lavender Town. It is said the beta version of the Pocket Monster was released to some kids to test the games. This is the beta version of In the late 1800s, Thomas Otto and his family moved into a mansion at the corner of Eaton and Simpton Street in Key West, Florida, now known as the Artist House. The Ottos were known to be stern with their servants, sometimes even mistreating them. It was the treatment of one such as heightened servants that provides a twist in this story. This woman was hired to take care of their son, Robert. One day, Miss Otto surprisingly witnessed her practicing black magic in their backyard and fired her. Before she left, the woman gave Robert a lifelike doll which stood 3 feet tall, had button eyes, human hair, believed to be Robert's, and was filled with straw. Dolls that resembled children were not unheard of during this time, but this proved to be one that was special. Robert named the doll after himself and often dressed him in his clothes. Robert the doll became his trustworthy companion. He took it with him on shopping trips into town. The doll had a seat at the dinner table where Robert would sneak bites of food. When his parents weren't looking, Robert would even be tucked into bed with the boy at night. Soon his innocent relationship began to take a strange nature. Soon after, Robert chose to be referred to his middle name, Gene. After being scolded by his mother, he told that Robert was the doll's name, not his. Gene was often heard in his toys room having a conversation with Robert. Gene would say sometimes in his childish manner, and response could be heard in such a lower voice. Sometimes Gene would become very agitated, worrying the servants and his mother. She would on occasions burst in to find her son crawling on the floor while Robert sat crouched in a chair or on the bed, gleaming at him. That was only the beginning. Household objects would be found thrown across the room. Gene's toys turned up mutilated, and giggling could be heard. Whenever those unusual acts took place, Gene would always say, "Robert did it." The boy took the punishment, but always insisted that the blame was Robert's. As the mischief grew, more and more servants took their leave as new ones were hired. The Otto's relatives felt it was time to do something. With the recommendation of a great aunt, Gene's parents removed Robert from his care and placed him in a box in the attic. This is where he resided for many years. After the death of his father, Gene was wilted by his whole boyhood home. He decided to live in the Victorian mansion with his new wife. Gene had become an artist and felt the house was spacious and would provide a place for him to paint. He went to the attic and dusted up a childhood toy. He became attached to the doll despite his wife's displeasure. Gene would take the doll along with him everywhere they went. He sat in his favorite little chair while Gene and his wife slept nearby. The turret room became Robert's domain after Miss Oda moved him back to the attic. Their marriage slowly became sour until Miss Oda surprisingly went insane and died of an unknown reason. Gene followed soon behind. Robert supposedly attacked people, sometimes locking them in the attic. People who passed by claimed to hear evil laughter coming from the turret room. For some time, Robert remained in the empty house by himself until a new family purchased the mansion and restored it. The doll was once again moved to the attic. This pleased it as much as the last time. The doll was often found throughout the house. On one certain night, Robert was found at the foot of the owner's bed, giggling with a kitchen knife in its hand. This was enough to send them fleeing into their home. Robert was later moved to East Martello Museum in Key West, where he sits perched in a glass box. Despite his new living quarters, the doll is believed not to be giving up his menacing ways. Visitors and employees claim that they have seen the doll move. His smile has been known to turn into a scowl. One employee claimed Robert, turned off all the lights, and left for the night. The next day, he returned to find the lights on. Robert sitting in a different position that night before, with a fresh layer of dust on his shoes. Some say he'll even curse you. If you take a picture of him, you must ask politely. He tips his head in permission. However, if he doesn't, and you take the picture anyway, a curse will befall upon you and whoever accompanied you to the museum. The same will happen to you if you make fun of him. To this day, Robert remains at the East Martello Museum in his sailor suit, clutching his stuffed lion, continuing his metaphor. I just want to start off by saying, if you want an answer at the end, prepare to be disappointed. There isn't one. There was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios in the year 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course. Most internships aren't. But it did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it might not seem like a big one, but to most kids at the time, they would go crazy over it. Now, since I worked directly with the editors in animation, I got to view the new episodes before they aired. I'll get right to it without giving unnecessary details. They had recently made the SpongeBob movie. The entire staff was somewhat sapped of activity, and it took longer to start up the session. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with Series 4 premiere and set everyone and everything back for several months. Me and two other interns were editing in the room along with some lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received the copy as was supposed to be the fear of a Krabby Patty and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that it isn't final yet, animators often put up a mock title, sort of an inside joke with us with phonies, oftentimes leave with such as how sex doesn't work instead of rockabye by Vel when SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a scalpel. Nothing particularly funny, but work-related chuckles. So when we saw a title called Squidward Suicide, we didn't think of it more than a morbid joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky music played as normal. The story began with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We heard SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to stop so he could keep it down as he has a concert tonight and he needs to practice. SpongeBob says okay and goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The Bubble Splash screen comes up and we see the end of Squidward's concert. This is where things begin to seem off. While a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this point, as the sound is synced with the animation, so yes, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as the skips never happen. There was a slight murmur in the crowd before they began to boo him. Not normal cartoon booing in the common show, but you could very clearly hear the malice in it. Squidward's in full shame and looks visibly afraid. The shot goes for the crowd with SpongeBob in the frame, and he too is booing, very much unlike him. That isn't the oddest thing, though. What is weird is everyone has hyper-realistic eyes, very detailed, clearly not shot from real people's eyes, but something a bit more real than CGI. The pupils were red. Some looked at us. Some looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of the bed, looking from forlorn. The view out of his porthole window is out of the night sky, so it isn't long short after the concert. The unsettling part is at the point where there is no sound. Literally, no sound. Not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It is as the speakers were turned off, though. Their statuses show them working properly. He just sat there blinking in the silence for 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands, or tentacles, over his eyes as he cried quietly for a full minute more. All while a sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounds like a slight breeze through the forest. The screen slowly begins to zoom onto his face. By slow, it means more noticeable. If you look at the shot 10 seconds apart side by side, his sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit, as if it twists in on itself in a split second, then back to normal. The wind through the trees sound slowly gets louder and more severe, as the storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is sound and Squidward's sobbing sounding real, as if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as the speakers were holes, the sound were coming through from the other side. As good as the sound the other likes to have, they didn't purchase the equipment to be the same product, the sound equality. Below the sound of the wind and sobbing, very faint, something sounding like laughing. It came at the odd intervals and never lasted more than a second, so you had a hard time pinning it. We watched the show twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific, but I've had time to think about this. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen as a single frame was replaced. The lead animation editor paused and rewound frame by frame. What we saw was horrible. It was a photo of a dead child. It couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloodied. One eye dangling over its upper face popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open and the entrails inside beside him. He was laying on the pavement, probably a road. The most upsetting part was that there was a shadow of the photograph. There was no crime tape, no evidence tape or markings, and the angle was completely off the shot designed to be evidence. It would seem the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were, of course, modified but pressed on, hoping that this was a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward still sobbing, louder than before, and half body and frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down his face from his eyes. The blood was also done in hyper-realistic style, looking as if it was touched. Like if you had touched it, you get blood on your fingers. The wind sounded now as if it was a gale blowing through the forest. There were even snapping sounds of branches, the laughing, a deep baritone blasting at longer intervals and coming more frequent. After about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back. We all were, but he knew he had to. This time the photo was of what appeared to be a little girl, no older than the first child. She was laying on her stomach, her barrettes in a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was popped out and popped naked except for her underpants. The details were piled on top of her above the crude cut along her cheek. Again, her body was on a sheet and photograph shadows were visible, very similar in size and shape to the first one. I had to choke back vomit on, and when entered, the only female in the room ran out. The show resumed. About 5 seconds after the second photo played, Squidward was silent, as did all the sound. It was like the screen started, but it was his tentacles down. His eyes were now done in hyper-realism, like the others were in the beginning of this episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen as if watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fear introduction of all the sobbing was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did the deep voice laughing, and this time the photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop on the 4th and back up. This time the photo was of a boy at the same age, but this time the screen was different. The entrails were just being pulled out from stomach wound by a large hand. The right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down it. The animator proceeded. It's hard to believe, but the next one was different. But we couldn't tell what. He went on to the same thing. He went back in the first and played them quicker, and I lost it. I vomited on the floor. The animation and sound editors gasped at the screen. The fifth frame were not as the same 5 different photos. They were played out as if they were frames from a video. We saw the hand slowly lift out guts. We saw the kid's eyes focus on it. He even saw 2 frames of the kid begin to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. We had to call the creation to see this to Mr. Hillenberg. Mr. Hillenberg arrived within 15 seconds. He was confused as to why he was called down there, so the editor just continued the episode. Once the few frames were showed, we all screamed. All sound stopped again. Squidward was just staring at the viewer, full frame of the face. For about 3 seconds, the shot quickly panned out and the deep voice said, "Do it." And we see in Squidward's hand a shotgun. He immediately pulls the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatter all over the wall behind him, in his bed, and he flies back within the force. The last 5 seconds of the episode showed his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling on what's left of his head above the floor, started blinking at it. Then the last episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry at this. He demands to know what the heck was going on. Most people left the room at this point, so it was just a handful of us to watch it again. Viewing the episode twice only served to imprint the eternity in my mind and cause me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I stayed. The only theory I couldn't think of that the file was created by someone in a chain from the drawing studio to here. The CTO was called to analyze it when it happened. The analyzing of the file did show it was edited by new material. However, the time strap of it was a mere 24 seconds before it began viewing it. All equipment involved was examined to foreign software and hardware. Well, all glitches, as well as the time strap was glitched, showed the wrong time, but everything checked out fine. We didn't know what happened to this day. No one does. There was an investigation due to the nature of the photos, but nothing came out. No child scene was identified and no clues were gathered from the data involved, no physical clues in the photos. I never believed in an unexplainable phenomena before, but now I know something happened, and I can't prove that anything about it beyond identical notice. I have to think twice about.
Stop. No, don't look. It just encourages them. You know who I'm talking about. Them. More specifically, her. Keep those eyes focused here. Don't look. Don't even glance. Use your peripherals because I know you see her. Just at the very edge of your vision. Glance at the left side of the monitor. Don't glance beyond it. There. Your peripherals should have picked up a bit more. You saw in the corner, didn't you? You saw her black hair below and across her pale face, the loosening nightgown she wears over her menacing frame. She's been here for a while, just waiting. That's how they spend their time. The spirits of the damned, the ones unfit for heaven yet avoiding hell, the ones who walk the earth with their sins on their shoulders. They live in constant, immutable, indescribable pain. The story goes that when St. Peter takes pity on a soul who has committed a grave sin like murder, rape, torture, cannibalism, or worse, he punishes that soul and sends them back to our plane to exist among the living until they successfully repent their sins. But first, he rips out their eyes so they can convert not. Then he tears their jawbones from their skull so that they cannot speak evil. No, don't look. She has moved closer, but that is only her curiosity. She can't actually see you, not as you can see her. She sees in outlines, in blurs in motion. Her empty sockets let her see a person's soul, yet it is useless to her. She lives not on the person, but on the body. Her spirit hungers for communion of flesh, but she is eternally denied. Only the Savior can be a paramount conduct of communion, to satisfy her cravings. She has tried, though. She only has tried often in the past. She certainly has taken an interest in you, hasn't she? You see, she feeds on the living. She, like many before her, found humans to alternate her
a million. She starves for communion, but humans like yourself can work as a placebo of sorts. She tried to get you to turn, to see into the void which take residence over where her eyes used to be. She'll pull you in, hypnotizing you into the dark hollow sockets. She closes in even more, excitedly inhaling on your supple skin. She jabbed her rotten teeth into your slender neck and slapped the blood with her slopping tongues. She'll jab her rotten teeth with her slender neck and slap the blood with her flopping tongue. I'll scrape in with her fangs and scoop out the flesh like ice cream. I'll yelp with glee at the warmth of her innards as I slash into your flat, fatty abdomen. I'll pull in the bones from your innards and suck the marrow out of your canine filling. I'll jab my bony fingers into your eyes and take them for my own. I'll rip your jawbone from your skull and use it as my own. I'll become whole again with your help. Modern playing cards are filled with layers of meaning and symbols that can be traced back centuries. The four kings, for example, are based on real rulers. The king of diamonds represents the wealthy Julius Caesar. The king of clubs is the brutal Alexander the Great. The king of spades represents the strong but kind David of Israel. And the king of hearts represents the emotionally disturbed Charles V of France. It is this king that we will be dealing with today. It should be also noticed that Charles was one of the four who was actually there to see the day of his face was printed on the playing cards, which made him realize why he actually part of the others. Charles' visage was put on the King of Hearts at the very beginning of his rule, but he never got a chance to come into contact with playing cards until many years later, when he became very ill with a fever and was informed that he will be bedridden for the rest of his life. It was during the period that Charles began learning card game to pass the time, such as various versions of blackjack. Vieng Tang Ung, 21. Charles lay in bed for 2 years, constantly fiddling with the cards and always getting sicker. As time passed, there were reports that Charles had begun obsessing over the idea that the king, being the 13th card in a suit, was causing him bad luck. He talked about how he was starting to see the numbers pop up everywhere and that he was close to figuring out the secret. Of course, his ramblings were blamed on the fever, and by the end of the second year, he had been declared insane and his son Louis XIII took over the throne. One day, several months after the end of his reign, one of Charles' physicians went to the chamber to find a frail old man standing in the middle of the room, vaguely wielding a sword. Before the doctor could react, the king said, "El montes, el 20 de tres, et el nes pes significa podres verex metores," which roughly translates to, "They have shown me the truth of 13, and it's not meant for mortal eyes." Without hesitation, the king processed to ram the blade through the left side of his head, between the ears and the temple, until it came out the other side. He wavered at the moment before collapsing to the floor dead. After the incident was announced, and that it was made public that the king had gone mad, the images of Charles on the King of Hearts was altered to show his suicide. Although the picture is shown significantly less graphical, the image of Charles thrusting the sword into his skull could be still found in the modern playing cards. Perhaps the strangest part of the whole story, however, is that Charles chose to kill himself 7/6/1462. Whether it was intended on the king, the fact that 7 plus 6 equals 13, and 1 plus 4 plus 6 plus 2 equals 13 can only be an explanation as a coincidence. In rural southern Illinois, a toy company began selling realistic dolls to expectant mothers. But apparently after the mother had her child, the toy would start crying. Eventually, the rocking motion advised to calm it down wouldn't work, and you couldn't get it to stop without shaking it. Eventually, it started crying. The parent would have to beat it. The beating and thrashing would have to get harder and harder until it would be quiet. The only thing it seemed to shut the baby doll up, apparently, was bash its head against the wall or destroy whatever mechanism triggered the crying. On more than one occasion, the neighbors called the authorities to report child abuse. When the police arrived, they found the bloody remains of an infant smashed across the wall and the floor. In most cases, the mother couldn't understand why the police were there. She just got rid of the stupid doll as she rocked the baby-shaped bundle in her arms. My name is Tommy Springsteen, and my life has been the fairly simple day, broken record. I go to work, come home to my son who just got home from school, see my wife, and had this amazing child. Everything was perfect. Then one day I came home to her mangled body laying on the floor. Oh God, it looked like an animal had torn her limbs from limb. Even this day, no one knows what did it. Well, no one except for me and my son. You see, a couple months back, my son and I had settled down for bed, and it was all played out like usual. I watched him brush his teeth. He lay down and I sat by him until he fell asleep. Then I proceeded to my room. I needed sleep. I worked a couple extra hours that day, and I had to get to my sister to watch my son after school. Just as I had almost fallen asleep, a loud crash woke me. And this wasn't like a remote falling off the couch crash. It was like a baseball bat hitting a window crash. Strangely, it came to my son's room. I rushed to see what happened, and what I saw was my son curled up under the blanket, shaking, and his lamp busted on the floor. Hey, what happened? I asked in a low voice. He got mad at me, he said, crying. He? He who? The dark man, he fussed. Who's the dark man? He makes me hurt myself. My son collapsed as he muttered the words. Well, it's okay. He won't hurt you now. No. He's gonna kill me. He said he would if I told anyone that... What was that? Just as those words left his mouth, I was thrown against the wall and looked up to see a dark, faceless figure standing over my son, and his deep, menacing voice almost echoed as he spoke.
Child, I warned you not to speak of me, but you have, so now you and your father will be destroyed as your mother was.
The second those words left his mouth, I knew this was the person who killed my wife. Red shot through my veins as I punched the thing in the face. But even though with all my strength, it didn't even flinch. What the fuck are you? I demanded in the dark man's voice.
You will know soon enough.
And he pushed me with all his might out of my son's door, and I fell down the stairs. My son then came running after me, and the creature followed behind, saying,
Don't run, child. It will only make it that much worse.
I scooped up my son and ran for the door. As I threw open the door, I couldn't believe my eyes. In front of me stood my wife, completely perfect, looking just like she did before she died. The thing then said,
Your beautiful wife, who I have wrapped deep in my embrace, will be released and return to you just as she was before death, if you give me your child's life.
I actually thought about it for a second, but I couldn't. Fuck you. You're not taking him from me. Just as I said that, my wife suddenly turned into a horrible, dismembered corpse and tried to grab me. I dodged and ran all the way to the police station with my son in my arms. After what happened that day, I immediately moved out of the house into a new one across town. Nothing like that ever happened again, but sometimes, when I think about that night, I wonder, what would happen if I just gave up my son? There once was a man who made beautiful dolls of all shapes and sizes. He even made life-size dolls. Many requested these expensive and exquisite dolls, and though these dolls brought the homo man a lot of money, he lived modestly with his young son, Vine. The young boy was fascinated by his father's work. The doll parts and finished dolls filled the home. Each was acquired and had their own beautiful personality. Vine would match in fascination as his father would paint the delicate lips on their pale faces. He wanted to be just like his father someday and create gorgeous works of art. One day, a rich businessman requested an ornate life-size doll from the humble doll maker. He went by the name Gear. However, the doll maker refused to make the doll upon discovering Gear was crooked and wanted the doll for perverted means. Gear grew enraged at the doll maker's refusal, so enraged that he sent hired arms to get rid of the doll maker. The doll maker's home was set ablaze. He sacrificed himself to save his son from the flames. Vine watched in horror and dismay as his father was burnt alive before him. His tears only evaporated from the heat as he watched his home turn to rubble and ash. He sobbed over the remains of his father, surrounded by charmed residents of his home, of the beautiful ornate dolls. They were all now melted, disoriented, horribly disfigured, ortiques of what they once were. Vine searched throughout the wreckage with his tiny hands, trying to find anything that may have survived the blaze. In the end, all he could find was a life-size pink glass eye. He cupped it in his hands and held it close to his heart. His messy black locks falling to his face. The eye was all he had left. The child was in a mere age of 9 when he watched everything he had known be destroyed in an instant. Unfortunately, the terrors were not over for the child. Gear had hired Orange returned to the scene of the crime to make sure the doll maker was truly dead. They found the charred corpse in once great maker. However, they also came across the son. Not sure what to do with the child, they abducted him and took him to Gear. Gear had no real means for the child, but decided to keep him. Kept him to replace the doll he never received. He kept Vine for 3 years, treating him like a doll and not just playing with him. Vine was a prisoner. The boy couldn't take it anymore and began to lose himself. His mind began to deteriorate. One night, while the man loomed over Vine had him pinned to the bed, trying to play with him. Vine decided he didn't want to play anymore. Vine quickly grabbed a pen and a nightstand and began to stab at the man's cartilage. Blood gushed from the hole. It splattered all over the walls, floor, and Vine himself. Vine had just killed the man for the first time. As the body lay there stiffing, Vine stole some money and quickly escaped. Vine lived on the streets. He wanted to start up a family business again to make dolls. He lived in an abandoned, boarded-up apartment in a bad part of town. The money he stole got parts and painted beautiful dolls. He sold them, getting some money, traded up, and making more and more beautiful dolls. More lifelike dolls, plastic, clay, and more clay, no longer becoming enough to satisfy Vine. News report: missing teen murdered. A horrifying scene was discovered in Newtown Park. Emily Ryder brutally mutilated. Autopsy report: Emily Ryder. Cause of death: blood loss and shock. Found in what appeared to be an elegant hand-stitched gown. The corners of Emily's mouth had been sewn into a smile and painted lips deep red, eyes gouged out and replaced with glass ones, fake eyelashes, and painted makeup. Her nails were removed and replaced with fake ones. A frozen expression remained on her face. Her head was shaved and replaced with a blue hair sewn onto her scalp, replacing her once blonde locks. And perhaps the most disturbing, every joint in her body was popped out of their sockets or broken. Truly the work of a psychopathic killer. Examining notes. It appears Emily Ryder was very much alive when the killer started mutilating her. She was alive as he had sewn her face into place. Each lock of her head tastefully sewn her scalpel as her eyes were gouged out. She was instantly found on the park bench, put in place like a doll on display. They would explain perhaps why her joints were popped out of their sockets. It would make it easier to display her in whatever way he pleased. By the way of killing was executed, it appeared the serial killer views works crime of art. Jason Harrods, medical examiner. Emily was Vine's second murder, but a first of the string. He got her through creating new dolls, carving them, making them beautiful. He was now 17, never caught, still in an abandoned home, still killing. He had gone completely mad, though he did not believe so. One might describe him as a schizophrenic. Vine, however, thought he was fine. He lived in a reality he had created for himself, in his own mind. He was not a killer. He was an artist who made beautiful dolls. Vine prided himself in his work, but he still saw himself as worthless, dirty, used goods. In an attempt to make himself as beautiful as his dolls, he gouged out one of his eyes and replaced it with the only thing he had left from his childhood, the glass eye. He had it stitched half smile onto his lips. However, he did not finish the job. There was too much pain. He felt he failed in making himself beautiful, leaving scars, leaving his face mutilated by his own hands. He knows he is damaged goods. He knows he is worthless. All he can do is make people happy by making his dolls beautiful. His work has become popular in newspapers, television broadcasts for displaying his art in public places. And he loves his given name by the public too, the doll maker. Just like Daddy, right? Let me make you beautiful. Has anyone heard about the dying soldier from The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time? Many simply pass by him in the back alley of Hyrule's Castle Market Town, but in the finished game, he appears right after you get the Ocarina of Time and tells you to go to the Temple of Time. After telling you this, he stops moving and is presumably dead. However, in the early build of the game, he played a different role and led you to a different place. Just like many who played the finished version, many teasers passed over the dying soldier, those who found him and treated him with surprise. For finding him, you were given the key to Hyrule's castle. Some testers thought the key would lead them to the Triforce, as the key had the Triforce symbol engraved upon it. They followed the tip the soldier gave them to enter the path leading to Hyrule Castle, which they followed. They noticed something was off. There were no guards protecting the grounds from trespassers. The gate was open. The sound was mute. As this went on the early build of the game, the testers thought it was simply a glitch or a bug. They eventually found their way all to the new section of Hyrule Castle and continued until they ended up on a locked door. They used the key given up to the soldier to unlock the door. Link opened the door slowly, and after he unlocked it, as he didn't want to enter, eventually the door opened and Link walked into the darkness. The new environment opened up. It was all a hall. You could see through the windows where you first met Zelda. Ganondorf wasn't present. The guards were nowhere in sight. But there was something that the testers would never forget. On the side of the room, there was a bloody remains of the King of Hyrule. Most testers screaming, and some even stopped playing. It was quite horrific. They assumed the king was dead, but then Link walked up to him, the text box open. He said he would bring help, not a child. One school day, a boy named Tom was sitting in his class doing math. It was 6 more minutes until after school. As he was doing his homework, something caught his eye. His desk was next to the window, and he turned to look into the grass outside. It looked like a picture. When school was over, he ran to the spot where he saw it. He ran fast so no one else could grab it. He picked it up and smiled. It had a picture of the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She had a dress with ties and red shoes, and her hand was formed into a peace sign. She was so beautiful, he wanted to meet her. So he ran all over school asking anyone if he knew her or have ever seen her before. But everyone he asked said no. He was devastated. When he was home, he asked his older sister if he knew the girl, but unfortunately, she also said no. It was very late, so Tom walked up the stairs, placed the picture on his bedside table, and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Tom was awoken by a tap on his window. It was like a nail tapping. He got scared. After the tapping, he heard a giggle. He saw a shadow near his window. So he got out of his bed, walked towards the window, opened it, and followed the giggling. By the time he reached it, it was gone. The next day, he asked his neighbors if he knew her. Everybody said, sorry, no. When his mother came back, he even asked her if she knew her. She said no. He went to his room, placed the picture on his desk, and fell asleep. Once again, he was awoken by the tapping. He took the picture and followed the giggling. He walked across the road when suddenly he got hit by a car. He was dead with the picture in his hand. The driver got out of the car and tried to help him, but it was too late. Suddenly, he saw the picture and picked it up. He saw a cute girl holding up 3 fingers. It's Christmas Eve in snowy 1800 London, England, and in a small house at the edge of town there lived a lonely 7-year-old boy named Isaac. Isaac was a sad child with not a friend to his name. While most children were spending time with their families and eagerly looking forward to opening the presents that were placed with care beneath a beautiful decorated Christmas tree, little Isaac spent this most holly of nights alone in the cold, dusty attic room. Isaac's parents were very poor, and his mother was a strict crow of a woman who stayed at home and schooled Isaac. His father worked long hours down at the London harbor to support his family. Although a large portion of his earnings went towards purchasing and consuming copious amounts of alcohol at the end of his shift, sometimes he would come home drunk and being thrown out of every bar in London and shout at his beloved wife, Isaac's mother. Occasionally, it would escalate to violence, and he would end up beating her vulgarly. Then, when he was done, he'd force himself upon her in a drinking sexual rage. As it so happens, this particular night was one of those occasions. Isaac just remained quiet, quivering beneath the soiled bed sheets until the screams and loud bangs subsided. Once poor frightened Isaac was finally able to fall asleep, he dreamed of what it would be like to have a friend to play with. So maybe he could laugh and be happy with other children of London. Luckily for little Isaac, this Christmas Eve marked a big chance. With his assembled loneliness, caught the attention of a guardian angel, who then crafted a very special gift for the sad little London boy. As the sun rose on Christmas morning, Isaac opened his eyes to find a strange wooden box sitting on the foot of his bed. With eyes widened in awe, he stared at the colorful handicraft box, wondering who had left it. He was not used to receiving gifts, especially toys. With little toys Isaac did have were ones he had found abandoned in the street or washed up in the gutter. Isaac scooted up to the foot of his bed in front of the mysterious box and picked it up with both hands. The box was beautifully painted in color styles. With carvings of happy clown faces on the side, there was a tag on the box that simply read, "For Isaac." On the top of the box was an engraved text. Isaac squinted his eyes to sound out the words, "Laughing Jack in a box." He paused. "Laughing Jack in a box?" Isaac heard of a jack in a box, but never heard a laughing jack in a box. His mind spun with curiosity as he grasped the metal crank. Isaac turned the crank, and the song "Pop Goes the Weasel" chimed in time with the crank's gragnation. As the song came to the climax, Isaac sang along with the final verse, "Pop goes the weasel." But nothing happened. Isaac let out a sigh. "It's broken." He placed the box down on the edge of the bed and shuffled across his small dusty room to his dresser, where he changed out his soiled sleepwear and his usual tattered clothes. Suddenly, Isaac heard a loud rattling noise coming from the bed behind him. He spun around to witness the wooden box violently shaking. Then, without warning, the top of the box swung open, and a parade of colorful smoke and confetti blew out. Isaac rubbed his eyes in disbelief of what he was seeing. As the smoke cleared, there stood a tall, thin, multicolored clown man with bright red hair, a swirly rainbow-colored cone nose, and feathery shoulders that sat atop of his ragged and colorful clown outfit. The technicolored clown spread his arms and excitedly announced, come on, whether big or small, to see the best clown in the law, the one, the only, Laughing Jack in a box." Isaac's eyes lit up. Who are you?" he asked. The colorful Karen stepped down off the bed and with a happy grin said, "I'm glad you asked. I am Jack, your new friend for life. I'm magical. I never get tired of playing. I'm a whiz at the accordion, and I adapt and deliver with your own changing personality. In other words, whatever you like, I like." Isaac looked at the mysterious clown man. "We're friends?" he stuttered. Jack looked at the boy while cocking an eyebrow. "Friends? We're best friends. I was especially created to be your not-so-imaginary friend, Isaac." Isaac's jaw dropped. You know my name?" Jack let out a whimsical laugh. "Of course I know your name. I know everything about you. So now that the introduction is out of the way, how would you like to play a game of I Spy?" Isaac grinned from ear to ear. "Really? We can play games? I'd love to. Oh, He paused. "I can't. I have to go downstairs to see Mother for homeschooling and chores." His smile faded to a look of disappointment. Jack placed his hand on Isaac's shoulder and with a warm smile said, "It's okay. I'll be waiting here for you when you get back. Isaac's smile returned as he looked up at his new friend. Just then he heard his mother's shrill voice calling from downstairs. Well, I gotta go. I'll see you after I'm done, Jack, he said as he headed toward the door. Jack smiled. Absolutely, kiddo. Oh, and, Isaac? Isaac looked back at Jack, who gave him a wink and said, You should wear that smile more often. It suits you. Isaac grinned happily as he turned and walked out the door. All day, Isaac told his mother about the amazing colorful clown who came out of the magical box that appeared at the front of his bed. His mother, however, did not believe a word of it. Finally, he persuaded his mother to follow him up to his room so she could behold Laughing Jack for herself. Then walked up the stairs and Isaac swung the door to his room. See, Mother, he's right here. Isaac paused as he scanned the room that contained neither magical dancing clown man nor a mysterious wooden box. Isaac's mother was not amused. She gave Isaac a glare so menacing it made his knees weak and his stomach sick. But, Mother, he was... Isaac's mother delivered onto him a swift, hard smack across his face. His eyes began to tear up and his lip began to quiver as he could feel himself about to break down. You stupid, insolent child! How dare you lie to me in such a childish idiocy? Who would want to be friends with a useless worm such as you? You shall remain in your room for the rest of the evening, and shall receive no dinner. Now what do you say, you ungrateful wench? Isaac managed to swallow the knot in his throat and ordered mildly to reply, Thank you, ma'am. His mother glared down at him for the moment before leaving the room in disgust. Isaac kneeled over, burying his face in the side of the bed. Streams of tears ran down his cheeks as he began to weep. What's wrong, kiddo? A voice called out. Isaac looked over to the edge of the bed where Laughing Jack was now silently sitting beside him. Where were you? Isaac muttered. Jack ran his hand through Isaac's hair to comfort him as he softly replied, I was hiding. I can't let your parents see me, otherwise they won't let us play anymore. Isaac wiped tears from his now puffy eyes. Look, kiddo, I'm sorry I had to hide, but I'll make it up to you, because tonight we can play games and have tons of fun, Jack said, smiling. Isaac looked up at his vibrant pal and silently nodded, as a little smile began to form in the corners of his mouth. That night, Laughing Jack and Isaac played so many fun games. With a wave of his hand, Jack made all of Isaac's tin soldiers spring to life and march around the room. Isaac was amazed as he watched his toys move around the room on their own. Then Laughing Jack and Isaac told each other spooky ghost stories. Isaac asked Jack if he was a ghost, but Jack explained that he was more of a cosmic entity of sorts. At the end of the night, Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out an assortment of delicious candy. Isaac was ecstatic when he popped the first colorful treat in his mouth, as it was the first time tasting something so sweet. Isaac had so much fun and laughed so hard that night that things seemed to be finally looking up for little Isaac, at least until the incident that occurred 3 months later. It was pleasantly warm and sunny in London that day, which was a bit of a rarity, so with the help of a certain not-so-imaginary friend, Isaac was able to finish his chores early and was allowed to go outside and play for a bit. Things started off simple enough. The duo were back in the house playing pirates when Isaac spied the neighbor's cat sneaking into their garden. Yarg, we got an enemy spy up the starboard bow, Isaac yelled, captive by the fantasy and imagination. Yo-ho, I'll get them, Captain Isaac, explained his mate Jack in the best hearty pirate accent. Laughing Jack's arm stretched out across the garden and snatched the unsuspected feline, who began to struggle quite vigorously. Don't let him get away, Jackie, or I'll make you walk a plank, Isaac antagonized. Jack's grip on the cat tightened, and his arms grew and extended like anacondas, wrapping themselves around the wily feline. As it struggled for dear life, Jack's arm just kept squeezing the animals, pressuring the air out of its lungs. As one steer house pet's eyes began to bulge out of his eyes, there came a loud snap. Jack quickly released the creature from its grasp as its lifeless furry body thudded against the ground. There was a hushed silence as the two observed the cat's now twisted and mangled corpse. The silence was finally broken by an uproarious laughter coming from Isaac. Wow, I guess cats really don't have 9 lives. Isaac exclaimed, nearly teary-eyed from laughter. Laughing Jack began to chuckle as well. Well, but once you get in trouble, if your mother finds your neighbor's cat dead in the garden, Isaac's laughter quickly subsided. Oh, no, you're right. I'll just throw it back in the neighbor's yard. Isaac panicked as he grabbed a nearby shovel and scooped up the broken cat cadaver before lobbing it over the fence back into the neighbor's yard, then quickly went back inside and up into Isaac's room. About an hour later it came, an ear-piercing squawk of Isaac's mother shrieking his name from downstairs. Neither Jack nor Isaac said a word as he crept downstairs alone to face whatever horrible fate was coming to him. Jack could hear much yelling from downstairs, but couldn't make out what was being said. After about 30 minutes, a teary-eyed Isaac ascended the stairs back up to the room. Well? Jack asked nervously. Isaac just stared at the ground as he spoke. I tried to tell her it was you who hurt the cat. She didn't believe me. She said you weren't real. Jack frowned, knowing this was his fault. Isaac used his sleeve to wipe away his tears. I'm being sent off to boarding school. I'm leaving tonight, and you can't come with me. Laughing Jack's face turned into a shock. What? I can't come? Where will I go? Isaac said nothing, but pointed out at a beautiful colored box from where his friend had originated. Back in there? But I won't be able to get out until... Jack paused. Isaac looked up at his only friend with tears streaming down his face. Jack, I promise I will come back for you as soon as I can. Jack looked at the box, then back at Isaac. And I'll be here waiting for you, kiddo. Jack smiled as a single tear ran down his cheek. He walked over to the box. With a puff of smoke, was sucked back in, unable to be free once again until it was once again opened. That night, Isaac was sent off to boarding school. For the first time, Laughing Jack had felt what it was to be lonely. Even trapped in the box, Jack was able to see things going on around in it. So each day he waited for his friend to return, and each day the room grew older and dustier. Laughing Jack, one purpose was to be Isaac's best friend for life, and now he waits day after day, month after month, to reunite with his special friend. Isaac's parents still lived in the house, but never came to the upstairs room. The only time they made their presence known was when Jack would hear them fighting. Still, Jack's life became one solitude, loneliness, and disappointment. As years went by, once bright, vibrant colors began to fade into molecule blurs of pitch-black void and stark white emptiness, trapped all alone, eternal in hopelessness. 13 years passed until the night of Isaac's father came home particularly drunk and got into an argument with his wife, as per usual. Things escalated to physical violence once again, however this time she didn't get back up. Isaac's father had beaten his wife to a dead, bloody pulp and was sentenced to hang at the gallows the next day. With both his parents dead, this meant that the now 20-year-old Isaac inherited the dusty old room he spent earlier half of his childhood in. Laughing Jack was quite surprised when he heard his old friend's footsteps walking up the stairs to the attic room for the first time in 13 years. However, it was not the reunion Jack was hoping for. Isaac looked different. Not only was he older, but he seemed to possess his old grim look on his face. No longer was he hopeful and curious young boy Jack first met all these years ago. Jack eagerly waited Isaac's releasing him from the prison he had waited in for so many years. But still Jack's box sat there untouched and unnoticed. On a shelf in the corner of the room, with all other dusty, unwanted knickknacks, Isaac had completely forgotten about his old friend. dismissed as some sort of early childhood fabrication. Surprisingly, this made Laughing Jack feel nothing. He was hollow. 13 years of waiting and disappointment left the monochrome clown void of sorrow and self-pity. Jack remained in his box, colorless and without emotion. The next day, Isaac was sent off to work at his job as a upholsterer, being furniture repairs for the good people of London. Jack waited in captivity. Hours later, a drunken Isaac returned home and stumbled up the stairs to his room. But this time he had a friend with him, a lady friend Isaac had picked up at the bar early this evening. She was beautiful with flowing blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes, and a smile that could make hearts melt. Laughing Jack's attention was drawn to Isaac's guess. Who is this? A new friend. Who is this? A new friend? Why does Isaac need new friends? I thought I was Isaac's only friend. Jack thought to himself. From within his hellish confinement, Isaac and his lady friend sat down on the bed, chatted about life in London. Isaac made a joke about the weather, and they both laughed. Laughing Jack hissed with envy over Isaac's new friend. Isaac and the girl looked deeply into each other's eyes as they leaned in for a kiss, locking lips with passion, swirling tongues in one another's mouth. Jack was perplexed by the strange display of affection, for he had never seen kissing before. As the kissing grew more intense, Jack ran his long hair through the smooth thigh of the dress. However, his guest just brushed his hand away. Isaac was pursuant, though, and once again ran his hand her smooth thigh up her skirt, this time placing her hand up her silky garment. The woman took great pleasure to Isaac's sexual investment. What am I reading? And pushed Isaac's away before delivering a hard smack across his face. Isaac's eyes darkened as he glared at the woman. His once drunken passion turned to a booze-filled anger. The woman's heart sped up as she saw Isaac's face boil with rage. "Stupid whore!" Isaac yelled as he smashed his fist into the girl's face. Laughing Jack's eyes widened as he witnessed the long streak of the red liquid gushing from the girl's nose. What game is this? He thought, his eyes a virgin of such violent sights. Isaac's firm clenched the girl's wrist with one hand as he tore her panties off with the other. I'm still reading about sex. Dear God. Snuff bomb. The terrified girl tried to fight back, but Isaac was overpowering her. He roughly found her. Okay, skipping. Jack watched with wide and curious eyes as his old friend released his new playmate and clutched his mouth at it. Okay, with warm red blood. The frightened girl fell off the bed and dropped down to the floor as she scurried towards the exit. Isaac quickly lurched forward and was able to catch his fleeing plaything by end of her dress. Reaching back, he wielded a long candlestick of the nightstand beside him, and with all his might bashed in the back of the young girl's head, which burst open with like a ripe watermelon. Thick blood splattered across the room as the girl's blood convulsed over the ground for several seconds before going completely still. Blood was everywhere. Some droplets even managed to get on Laughing Jack's box, who was very much enjoying the show. For the first time in 13 long years, a smile began to creep across Laughing Jack's face, and all of a sudden a chuckle escaped his cold lips. Then another, and another, until Jack was cackling and howling with laughter from the other inside of his sealed box. What a wonderful, fascinating game, Jack thought as he watched the motionless girl, golden blonde hair turn red with blood. As the adrenaline began to mellow, Isaac, turning, realized he had to dispose of the body. He picked up the girl's lifeless corpse and plopped her onto the bed, but then left the room, closing the door behind him and locking it before leaving the house. He returned almost a full day later and re-entered the room, bringing with him a metal garbage can and a box of unholstered tools from work. He then cleared everything off the wooden desk on the wall opposite of the door, and then dragged the bed with the bloody corpse into the middle of the room. This not only gave Isaac room to work, but it also gave Laughing Jack a front row seat to the whole skeptical. Jack watched with a big, unfading grin as Isaac played his new game in the spoiled corpse. Only Isaac was all set up, he got to work. First, he dumped out the contents of his big black tool bag onto the work table behind him. An assortment of knives, hammers, pliers, and other tools were laid out before him. His first pick was skewered on-holster knife, which he had used to carefully skin the body. That skin was then replaced on racks and stretched and turned into leather. Once that was put in place, Isaac then used the handsaw to saw off the arms, legs, and head, distributing the home with several families of maggots in the process. After filling the garbage can with bleach and vile chemicals, he submerged the limbs until the meat was stripped from the bones. Isaac fished the bones out of the soupy corpse juice and placed them onto the work table. Then in the cover of the night, he brought the trash can outside and dumped the rotting remains in the London sewers to be swept away into the harbor. For the next 3 days, Laughing Jack watched the moderate as inspired Isaac crafted the only human anatomy in a grotesque armchair ambition. The femur was made into back legs of the chair, while the tibia of the feet were still attached to a course, which made into a front chair leg. A wooden frame was made into the base of the backing of the chair. However, the rim of the backing was crafted into the spinal cord. The arm bones were used as the arms of the chair and were fastened in place by some ribs. The now leathery flesh was sewn onto the seat and back in the backing of the chair, and the gold blonde hair was braided into lining of the base. On top of the armchair from hell sat the skull at once, belonging to the girl who had golden blonde hair, the sapphire eyes, and the smile that could melt hearts. Isaac was quite pleased with his work, and Laughing Jack, too, impressed by his old playmate's profound creativity. After that night, Isaac never touched another drop of alcohol again, for he now possesses much more macabre thirst. In the following weeks, Isaac made several improvements to his little workshop of horrors. He removed his mattress from the bed and put a row of thick wooden planks in place, and then he fastened arm and leg restraints to the bottom of the sides. This would mean he would be able to entertain his guests for long periods of time without them trying any rude escape attempts. Isaac needed only one final thing before planning another grotesque party. He worked on it for a week, straight hand carving it out of wood. After a coat of white paint was applied, Isaac's creation was complete. It was a wooden mask assembled something one would wear at a Vietnamese masquerade ball. It had a fur brow and a long troll-like nose, and would allow him to strike fear in the hearts of most beloved guests. With his new face complete and the room transformed into a bloody murder nest, it was finally time for Isaac Lee Grossman to bring home a new playmate. That following night, Laughing Jack watched as the masked Isaac Grossman stomped at the stairs, carrying him a large surlap sack with his new guest writhing within. He dumped the bag onto the torture bed, and out plopped the ground, gagged and very frightened young boy, probably only 5 or 6 years old. Isaac quickly undid the bindings and held him down as the restraints to his hands and feet of the steel bed frame. Tears streamed endless down the boy's helpless little face as Isaac laid out his tools on the workbench. Isaac returned wielding a pair of pliers and wasted no time. He slid the bottom jaw of the pliers underneath the boy's fingernails onto his right index finger and clamped it tightly. The boy's eyes quivered as he began muttering through the gag, begging Isaac to let him go. Isaac smirked as he slowly bent the pliers backwards, painfully prying off the first fingernail. The boy screamed through his gag as he withered in agony on the wooden boards. His finger began to gush with blood. Isaac then moved onto the boy's middle finger. Middle. firmly grasping the nail with the rusty pliers. Once again, he jerked the pliers back, but this time only half the nail tore off. The boy yelped in pain as the fingers twitched and shot with blood. Clamping the half plier off the nail, Isaac gave it another yank. The nail tore off, but not without taking a great deal of skin tissue with it. Even Isaac was a bit rebuffed by the painful sight. Unlike the spying Laughing Jack, who was cackling with joy at the disturbing action as he watched from his old dusty box, Isaac returned to the workbench and swapped the pliers with a large iron hammer. He then made his way to the foot of the torture bed, where with one hand he held out the boy's left leg. He raised the hammer high above his head, and as the boy pleaded with mercy through the dirty gag, then he, with all his might, slammed the hammer down onto the boy's bare kneecap, shattering the bone into gravel with a loud crack. The child, consoled in pain and shrill screams muffled through the gag tied tightly to his face. As the child struggled with intense pain, Isaac placed the hammer down into the wooden bed and returned once more at the workbench, where he equipped himself with a large sharp knife. Without delay, he began carving the words "useless worm" into the child's quivering chest. When he finished, the boy was barely conscious. Isaac knelt down and whispered into the boy's ear, "This is what happens to rotten boys who make nasty faces at people." The child's eyes filled with terror. The child's eyes filled with tears one final time as Isaac began to carve the boy's skin off his face. But to Isaac's surprise, the boy still clung to life. The mutilated child just stared up at Isaac with his big round eyes, which filled Isaac's black heart with rage and hatred. "Even without a face, you're still an ugly little shit," Isaac shouted as he picked up the hammer from the foot of the bed and began to bash the poor little boy's face in. He smashed it over and over until it was nothing but a bloody canvas mesh of flesh pouring from the thick red blood oozing out of chunks of brain matter. From across the room, Laughing Jack gleefully observed the grand finale, which had lived up to its expectations quite wonderfully. Isaac's next guest was a blind woman who was invited over for some tea. It took her almost 5 minutes to realize the chair she was sitting in was crafted using human remains, and another 6 minutes to find the stairs, only to topple down them, flailing and screaming like a loon. Isaac decided to end her cruel joke. There was an ice pick through her eye sockets. After that, he brought over a little girl who he force-fed broken glass before using her stomach as a punching bag. As the weeks went by, more and more unlucky souls met their end in Isaac Grossman's attic. And as the man Grossman's personality became more dark and sadistic, Laughing Jack's personality followed suit while he rotted within his dusty box. Until one very cold December night, the rusty nails that were holding up the shelf of forgotten knickknacks finally gave away, and the whole thing plummeted to the ground. Isaac heard the loud thud from downstairs and decided to climb up to the attic to investigate. He walked across the bloody-stained wood floor to the attic, over towards the fallen shelf. Isaac burst aside some of the knickets that broke in the crash. When he finally came across the jack-in-the-box from his childhood, Isaac barely recognized the old shredded box that he had picked off and blew off some dust. Then, for whatever nostalgic reason, he decided to grasp the handle of the box's rusty clank and began turning it. The horribly off-key "Pop Goes the Weasel" clank from the worn-out box, and as it reached its climax, Isaac sung along the final verse, "Pop goes the weasel." The top of the box swung open, but nothing happened. It was empty. Isaac expected as much, and he tossed the old thing in the garbage with the other broken knickknacks. After the mess was cleaned up, he went to the open door to go back downstairs, but it was stuck. Isaac pulled hard on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Just then he heard the most horrible, raspy voice call out to him, "Isaac." A cold jolt ran down Isaac's spine, and the hair on his neck of his back stood straight up as he slowly turned away. All the way across the room by the garbage can stood the nightmarish Laughing Jack. He was completely monochrome. His mangled black hair hung down in twisted locks, sharp, jagged teeth decorated his twisted grin, and his arms hung down low like a rag doll with grotesque long fingernails nearly scraping the floor. Then with a bone-chilly, raspy voice, fiddish clown voice, "How nice is it finally to be free? Did you miss me, Isaac?" Isaac was paralyzed in fear. But I thought you weren't real. Imaginary," Isaac stuttered. Jack replied with a long, horrific cackle. "Oh, I'm quite real, kiddo. In fact, I've been waiting such a long time for this day to finally come, when I can play with my best friend for life one last time." Before Isaac could reply, Jack's long arms stretched across the room and wrapped around Isaac's legs. The twisted clown began pulling him closer, dragging him into his own wooden torture bed as Isaac's fingernails scraped along the floor. Ignoring the resistance, Jack swiftly grabbed 4 3-inch long nails from the workbench and pressed them straight into Isaac's hands and feet, failing them into the wooden torture bed. Isaac growled in pain as he shouted at his captor, "Ah, you stupid fucking goddamn clown freak nose!" Laughing Jack just cackled as he forcefully held Isaac's head in place, stating, "If you can't say something nice, then don't say anything at all." Jack reached his long, crooked fingers into Isaac's mouth, firmly grasping his tongue and stretching it out as far as he could. The clown then reached back and grabbed the sharp knife from the table and slowly began to slice through the meat of Isaac's tongue. Once lobbed off, Isaac's mouth began to overflow with blood. Jack responded by shoving a small cylindrical metal tube through Isaac's throat to act as a temporary breathing hole. At this point, Isaac was already in great pain and had his eyes clenched shut to avoid seeing his sickening horror that was performed upon his body. "Come on now. It's no fun if you don't watch," Laughing Jack said playfully, but Isaac kept his eyes closed tight. Laughing Jack sighed, "Suit yourself." Jack then forcefully held open one of Isaac's eyes as he reached with his big arm and took out a long, pointy fishing hook from the workbench. Slowly, Jack proceeded the sharp end of the hook through the top eyelid, straight through the bottom of the eyebrow, and out the top, permanently pinning it open. Then it took out a second hook, pushing it through the bottom eyelid, pinning it to the cheek. Jack repeated the process to the other eye, and before long a series of sharp metal hooks made sure Isaac didn't miss out on any action. Laughing Jack then took the same knife he had used to lob off Isaac's tongue and began to focus on the removal of Isaac's lips. Jack forcefully slipped 2 stripes of flesh off Isaac's upper and lower lip and lower mouth, causing his teeth and gum to be completely exposed. Looks like someone hasn't flossed regularly," Laughing Jack cackled under his breath as he reached back and grabbed the hammer. Isaac attempted to mutter some kind of beg for mercy, however, only gurgled in moans that escaped his throat. Jack raised the hammer into the air, and with a twisted grin, he slammed it down, giving off a loud crack with the iron hammer, shattering Isaac's teeth with brittle clay. Jack dropped the hammer and began to howl with laughter as he tore off Isaac's shirt, taking the sharp knife and cutting straight down Isaac's chest all the way past his stomach. Isaac groaned with a sharp sting pain as the micronome monsters warmed his wretched fingers underneath Isaac's skin on Isaac's chest, peeling it off as it were, performed his horrible live autopsy. First, Laughing Jack began to pull Isaac's intestines in the same small manner a magician would pull a series of colorful cloths out of his pocket. Then, after sniffing off a small length of intestine, Jack pressed one end against his cold black limbs and began blowing air into the foul organs. Once inflated, he twisted it into the shape of a poodle, and with a loud cavil exclaimed, "I can do graffiti too!" Or, "I can do giraffes too!" Isaac remained still in shock, and as a clown created, gently placed the macaron balloon animal beside Isaac for his next trick. Laughing Jack reached deep inside Isaac's stomach captivity and yanked out one of his kidneys. Holding it in his hand, turned to his captive friend and shrugged, stating that kidneys really aren't my thing. Tossing the organ aside, Laughing Jack noticed that Isaac was beginning to drift into death. Feeling tired already? Why, we were nearly at the grand finale, Laughing Jack exclaimed as he reached into his sleeve and pulled out one of the adrenaline needles. This ought to perk you right up, Jack shouted as he slammed the needle into Isaac's retina. And injected the liquid into his right eye socket. Jack wiggled and twisted the needle further into your playmate's eyeball as Isaac was relayed back into his life to the feeling of sharp needles scraping the back of his eye socket. With a sinister chuckle, Jack yanked the needle out, pulling his eyeball out with it. Isaac's right eye now hung out of his socket by the eye stalk as it dripped down the side of his face. Jack smirked. "Well, now I have your full attention." The insidious clown then took his long, crooked index finger and poked in Isaac's stomach. Jack lowered his hand down towards the open captivity and stretched his mouth wide open. Within seconds, a torrent of filthy cockroaches started filling into the clown's gullet, spilling into Isaac's open chest. Each vile roach crawled and pushed its way into the small opening into Isaac's mouth, filling in full of disgusting, wretched bugs. As his stomach became bloated with bugs, the roaches began to scurry up his throat, squeezing their way out of his mouth in nasty captivity. Isaac was inches from death when his captor kneeled beside him and spoke into his ear. "It's been a blast, kiddo, but it looks like our time together is about up. No need for tears, though, because I plan to spread my friendship to all the lovely kids of the world." And with that, Laughing Jack said, reached into Isaac's chest and yanked out his still beating heart. As his life bled out on the cold wooden floor, or onto the cold wooden bed, Isaac's life flashed before his eyes. He saw his mother, his father, the boarding school, his victims, and the last thought that fluttered through his mind was the very special Christmas where he woke up to find a beautiful handcrafted wooden box that contained his very first friend. There were rumors when the police finally found Isaac Grossman's rotten, maggot-infested corpse weeks later on Christmas Eve that even though his face has been bashed and torn into bits, he almost looked happy. I must have been 6 or 7 where I lived in Lebanon. The country was ravaged by war at the time, and murders were common and frequent. I remember during a particular vicious era where the bombing rarely stopped, I would stay at home sitting in front of my television watching a very, very strange show. It was a kids' show that lasted about 30 minutes and contained strange and sinister images. To this day, I believe it was a thinly veiled attempt to part of the media that used scare tactics to keep kids in place, because the moral of every episode revolved around very uptight stuff like bad kids stay up late, bad kids have their hands under the covers when they sleep, and bad kids steal food from the fridge at night. It was very weird, and in Arabic to top it off. I didn't understand much of it, but for the most part of the images were very graphic and comprehensive. The thing that stuck me the most, however, was the closing scene. It remained much the same in every episode. The camera would zoom in an old, rusted closed door. As it got closer, the door's strange and sometimes even agonizing screams would become more audible. It was extremely frightening, especially for children's programming. Then the text would appear on the screen in Arabic reading. That's where bad kids go. Eventually, both the image and the sound would fade out, and that would be the end of the episode. About 15 or 16 years later, I became a journalist photographer. That show then had in my mind all my life, popping up in my thoughts sporadically. Eventually, I had enough and decided to do some research. I managed to uncover the location of the studio where much of the channel's programming had been recorded. Upon further research and eventually traveling on site, I found out it had now desolated and had been abandoned after the big war ended. I entered the building with my camera. It was burnt out from the inside. Either a fire had broken out or someone had wanted to incinerate all of the wooden furniture. After a few hours of curiously making the way into the studio and snapping pictures, I found an isolated, out-of-the-way room and having a breakthrough a few old locks and managed to break the heavy door open. I remained frozen in the doorway with several long minutes. Traces of blood, feces, and tiny bone fragments lay scattered across the floor. It was a small room and an extremely morbid scene. What truly frightened me, though, what made me turn away and never want to come back, was the bolted caged microphone. A man went to a hotel and walked up to the front desk to check in. The woman at the desk gave him his key and told him on his way to his room there was a door with no number that was locked and no one was allowed in there. She explained that it was a storeroom and that it was out of bounds. She reminded him of this several times before allowing him upstairs, so he followed the instructions of the woman at the front desk before going straight into his room and going to bed. However, the instincts of the woman had piqued his curiosity, so the next night he walked down the hall into the door and tried the handle. Sure enough, it was locked. He bent down and looked through the wide keyhole. Cold air pressed through it, chilling his eye. What he saw was in the hotel like this. In the corner of the room, there was a woman whose skin was incredibly pale. She was leaning her head against the wall, facing away from the door. He stared in curiosity for a while. Was this a celebrity? The owner's daughter? He almost knocked on her door out of curiosity, but decided not to. As he was still looking, the woman turned sharply and he jumped back from the door, hoping she was not suspect that he was spying on her. He curled away from the door and walked back to his room. The next day he returned to the door and looked through the wide keyhole. This time all he saw was redness. He couldn't make any sense of it out besides a distinct red color. A movie. Perhaps the inhabitants of the room knew he was spying the night before and he had blocked the keyhole with something red. He felt embarrassed that he made the woman so uncomfortable, and he hoped that she hadn't made a complaint to the woman at the front desk. At this point, he decided to consult her for more information. She sighed and said, "Did you look through the keyhole?" The man told her that he had, and she said, "Well, I might as well tell you the story of what happened in the room. A long time ago, a man murdered his wife in there, and we find that even now, however, stays that gets more uncomfortable. But these people were not ordinary. They were white all over, except for their eyes.